nilang bumili. Kailangan nilang mag-procure. At ano nga ba? What is the reason why there is procurement in government? Can you please take a look at this diagram and tell everyone, what is the trigger point? What is the reason why there is procurement in government? So I'll give you a clue. Look at the springboard of the arrow. The arrow starts from what word? Bakit tayo may procurement? Because there are needs of an agency. There are needs na kailangan mabigyan ng sagot. Yeah, ma-respond ng ating LGU. And itong mga needs really are different from office to office. So meaning, in the LGU, you are composed of executive branch. You also have your legislative branch. Dito sa executive branch, headed by our local chief executive, ang dami pong offices under that, right? Marami tayong opisina under the executive branch. So all of these offices are also considered end user units. So you can count ilan ba ang mga departments in our LGU, and that will correspond to your number of end user units. At ano yung role nila? What are the responsibilities? What are they supposed to do? As I've said, it starts, the procurement process in the agency start in quadrant 1, which is referred to as the identification of what are the needs. Ano nga ba ang kailangan ng ating opisina that has to be included later on in filling up the form as prescribed. This is a prescribed template which is labeled Project Procurement Management Plan. Okay? So maybe to some of you there, you have already experienced filling up the PPMP, but maybe the question would be focusing on the substance, the quality of the manner for which we prepared the PPMP. Maybe to some, madali lang yan. What do? We copy-paste from the previous year's PPMP na hindi naman nabili, or kung may nabili man, kailangan pa rin nating bumili kasi they are deemed consumed. Every year, bumibili tayo, and nakukonsume siya, so still we need to buy the same items in a yearly basis. But the question is, do we really have to copy it to make it the most easiest way? Or baka naman, hindi natin siya strictly kailangan i-copy, but we have to update regularly the content of that PPMP. And that is what is lacking, no? Ito yung medyo kulang tayo dito ng emphasis. So kailangan ang ating end user units are made aware that as you refer, yes, there's nothing wrong. You refer to your old PPMP, previous year's PPMP, but do an updating, reality checking as far as what? As far as the technical specifications, the costing of the items that are listed in that PPMP. Because as you know, ang kailangan natin gawin muna bago tayo mag-fill up ng PPMP is to do a market study. As shown here in this diagram, quadrant 1 speaks of the strategies or ano ang gagawin ng ating end user units for them to have a quality PPMP. Ito ang dapat natin objective. Okay? Hindi yung madalian, hindi yung for compliance only, kasi short of time na tayo and deadline na bukas. So ngayon, agad-agad tayo nagka-copy-paste without updating the substance. Okay, so that's very crucial in quadrant 1. And we will go back. Later on, our succeeding slides will focus on quadrant 1. But let me just proceed to explain first this whole procurement process as a start of our discussion. And later on, kumbaga, I will first attempt to bring you to the bigger picture, let you understand the bigger picture, what happens in an agency of government that procures for what they need. Ano yung nangyayari? So, and then later on, as I've said, we will go back to quadrant 1, which is the main focus of our topic today. Okay, so let's advance, no? Meaning, imagine that by now, we are done with the procurement planning process and we already have the PPMP with us. So, if there are, say, 15 na end user units, let's imagine that there are also 15 PPMPs, Project Procurement Management Plan, which is a planning document that we will now be submitting or forwarding to quadrant 2. Okay? What will happen to quadrant 2? Is it still procurement planning side? The answer is yes. Sa quadrant 2, remember, hindi pa tayo ngayon nagpo-procure. Okay? We are not yet doing actual procurement as we speak right now in quadrant 1 and in quadrant 2. So we are still preparing what we will procure. That's why it is emphasized again that quadrant 1 and 2 are the more important quadrant for discussion for today's procurement planning module. Now, question, who are the key players? I mean, okay, let's go to that later on. What happens to the PPMP that will be forwarded to quadrant 2? So again, imagine that these are the documents that are moving. Ang tumatakbo dito, of course, may timelines tayo. We reckon with certain timelines. And we also reckon with certain documents that is now that will manifest that nagmo-move, gumagalaw ang ating procurement timeline. So, the PPMP will first be subjected to a review, to a verification by the budget office. Okay, ito yung number 1 dito sa ating key players as listed in the outside, in the small boxes here outside the quadrant. Andyan si budget office, andyan ang box secretariat, the bids and awards committee, as well as our local chief executive as the head of the procuring entity, right? So ano ang gagawin ni budget officer? Siya ba talaga ang dapat nagre-receive ng PPMP? At yan ba talaga ang tamang proseso? The answer is yes. Originally, nung hindi pa lumalabas ang ating 2009 IRR, meaning doon pa tayo sa original IRR 1-A. Kasi, di ba, when the law was passed, I hope it was clear yesterday in the discussion, when RA 9184 was passed in 2003, within that same year, lumabas ang ating IRR-A. In that IRR, wala pa pong role si budget officer. So dati, dumidiretso ang ating mga PPMP kay box secretariat. Agad-agad si BACSEC nagko-consolidate without checking na nasama ba siya sa budget or not. So because of that, there were agencies na were able to procure, and when there were deliveries, ano yung mga naging issues? Mayroon nang sumisingil, mayroon nang mga humihingi na ng bayad after the delivery of certain items procured, only to found out na wala palang budget pang bayad. At sasabihin sa ating supplier, ay sir, pasensya, maghahanap pa po kami ng savings, gagawa pa po kami ng supplemental budget, and pakihintay lang po, hindi pa kami makakabayad today. And it is not a good practice in government Kaya siguro marami na until this time, ang dami nang ayaw sumali sa government procurement because na-branded tayo na mabagal or matagal tayong magbayad. Right? Umiiyak muna sila. And to think na most of these suppliers are just borrowing capital for them to venture into this kind of business. So, wala, yung ganansya nilang maliit, baka lumalabas, lugi pa sila. So, paano siya kinorek ni GPPB? The GPPB corrected that practice before. So, when the 2009 IRR was passed, binigyan na ngayon ng role si Budget Office. So, mula ng 2009 until the present, hindi agad-agad dumidiretso ang ating mga PPMPs kay Box Secretariat at dumadaan muna ito sa Budget Office to determine, ito ang important role ni Budget Officer, to determine kung yung requirement ng PPMP of that particular end user unit, sabihin na natin, Health Department, the Social Welfare Office, the Office of the Municipal Health Officer or the Municipal Social Welfare Officer, kasama ba yung total ng budgetary requirement for them to procure doon sa budget mismo ng kanilang department para maisama sa budget ng buong LGU? That's the key point why the role of the Budget Office is included in Quadrant 2. If the answer is yes, kasama naman, hindi lang yung budget hindi lang po for PS, hindi lang for MOOE, but kasama including those MOOE that need to be procured, and more importantly, yung capital outlays proposal, which are usually are all subject for procurement. Okay? Then only, now what about pag hindi siya pasok sa budget pala, yung total ng PPMP? What will the Budget Office do? Ibabalik po niya yung PPMP sa concerned end user unit. Okay? This is the first operationalization of the linkage. Again, I'll emphasize, this is the first level of operationalizing the need to link our procurement planning to the budget process with the inclusion of the Budget Office in Quadrant 2. Okay? So hindi po si budget again ang magko-correct, ang mag-a-adjust, kung kailangan i-adjust ang budget proposal ng end user units or yung PPMP ng end user units, hindi po si budget ang mag-a-adjust, but it will be returned back, referred back to the end user unit for them to do the needed adjustments. And only then, ibabalik siya sa Quadrant 2 for further assessment pag na-correct na siya sa level ni end user unit. Okay, so I hope that's clear. Then, what will BACSEC do after receiving the reviewed PPMP as to connectivity to the budget of the end user unit? This time, the BACSEC Secretariat will now do the role of consolidating the various PPMPs, yung 15 na yan, to become the annual procurement plan of the LGU. So, since at this time, we are also at the same time na nagko-consolidate si BACSEC ng PPMPs, si Budget Officer din naman ay nagko-consolidate din ng lahat ng budget proposal ng various offices. So, lalabas simultaneously, si Budget Officer, magkakaroon na siya ng kabuuhan or LGU-wide proposed budget that will now be submitted to the local chief executive. At ito na ngayon ang one of the basic attached document to the proposed budget would be the indicative annual procurement plan of the LGU. So again, remember, these are still planning documents. our budget is also considered as a plan. Remember that. Kasi, as I've said, yung definition natin ng budget, ano ba yung content ng budget, it's still an estimate, a plan, an estimate of how much LGU will be receiving in terms of NTA ngayon, di ba? Hindi na po IRA, National Tax Allotment, plus yung local revenue that the LGU will be collecting from local taxes or shares from the real property taxes or from other sources of funds. Okay? So, magiging attachment again ang ating indicative annual procurement plan to the total or the executive budget that will now be subject of approval by the local chief executive. So, here, before the local chief executive approve the indicative annual procurement plan, after na-consolidate ni BACSEC, papasok pa ang ating BAC. Mayroon na dito initial role ang ating members of the Bids and Awards Committee. What will they do? Kayong mga member ng BAC that are there that are participating right now, what is your role here in Quadrant 2? We are not yet procuring again. Remember, we are still assessing and helping our LGU prepare or plan for eventual procurement that will happen in the third quadrant. Okay? So the role of the BAC in the second quadrant would be to decide what is the appropriate procurement modality that will be required, that is prescribed by law and the rules. Because ngayon, nag-consolidate na si BACSEC, it follows or it may not follow na kung ano yung mode of procurement in the PPMP as prepared by the end user unit will be the same modality that will be undertaken by the LGU later on. So papasok na dito, magko-convene ang BAC chair and decide, and only after they have indicated the appropriate modality and sign as recommendatory that ito yung appropriate modality, only then the BAC Secretariat will forward the indicative APP for approval by the local chief executive. Okay, so once na-approve ni local chief executive ang ating indicative annual procurement plan, tapos tayo sa quadrant 2. Okay? So therefore, ang ating output document, ito yung mapuproduce in quadrant 2 is the indicative annual procurement plan. Okay? So here in quadrant 1, the proposed PPMP, remember hindi po automatic kasi na kung ano yung nasa PPMP ay automatically approved. Hindi po, kaya nga may assessment tayo. Now, after quadrant 2, we will now move forward to quadrant 3. In quadrant 3, this is now the selection or the actual process of selection from an array of suppliers for the LGU to choose what will fit best the need, right? Kanina sa definition natin sa procurement. So ito ang role talaga dito ng BAC, which will be discussed by another speaker in the next, maybe tomorrow or Thursday. The bidding process, the step-by-step process in procurement, either for goods, infra, or consulting. So I will not elaborate discussing quadrant 3. As I've said, we will reserve this for your speaker on this topic. Just a summary of what will happen in quadrant 3. Pag successful ang ating selection or actual procurement, ano ang document that we will be producing in quadrant 3? That will tell us na naging successful ang ating LGU in doing the actual selection. What document is that? At ang magiging reference dito for the BAC to do the procurement could either be the indicative APP if we are doing EPA, or the final APP if we are doing procurement during the execution phase. So meaning, let me emphasize that quadrant 3 can be done in two instances. Number one, if we conduct early procurement activity, meaning yung budget, na-submit na yung proposed executive budget, na-submit na ni local chief executive sa kanilang respective sanggunian, the LGU through the BAC can start conducting early procurement activity short of award. And we will discuss that later in the subsequent slides. But for now, just to emphasize na itong quadrant 3 can happen at two instances. Number one, again, during the budget authorization phase, meaning the budget is still with the sanggunian for legislative authorization. Di po ba? Deadline ni LCE, not later than October 16 during the year. Sinasubmit na siya para ma-legislate ni sanggunian. So while the sanggunian is deliberating on the budget, the BAC can already start conducting EPA. But the award will wait until the effectivity of the appropriation ordinance. Okay? Now, what is the second instance? The second instance is during budget execution phase, meaning we will wait until January, within January up to December of the budget year, magkakaroon ang LGU ng mga procurement. These are probably the small value procurement that were not really required to be conducted through EPA, right? Kasi hindi po lahat ng modality sa procurement ay pwede natin makonduct through EPA. So, sige. So, let me now again ask the question, ano ang output document natin in quadrant 3 that will tell us successful ang ating procurement? Mayroon tayong, what document is that? Sige nga, can we ask some of our participants? Pag successful ang procurement, anong document ang ginagawa ng ating LGU that will bind, that will now be the binding document between the LGU and the winning bidder or supplier? Sige nga, let me check. Very good. MLGU Salcedo, contract, perfected contract. Very good. Contract agreement, yes. So, it is the contract signed by both parties, meaning the head of the procuring entity and the winning bidder, winning supplier, that will now be the document that will move to quadrant 4. Okay? Kasi tapos na tayo sa quadrant 3. Nakapag-recommend na ang BAC, awarding of contract, in-award na po ng ating hope, nag-signing na sila ng contract, at magkakaroon na most likely ng another document which is the notice to proceed. So we will now move to quadrant 4 therefore. At here in quadrant 4, this will now be the implementation of our planned programs and projects. Okay? Plinano natin in quadrant 1, in-approve sa quadrant 2, at nagkaroon na nga ng actual procurement in quadrant 3, and now we are going to implement what were planned and budgeted. Okay? So here, who are the key players? So take a look. Wala na dito ang BAC sa quadrant 4 kasi ang role ni BAC ended in quadrant 3 when they recommended the appropriate, the awarding of the contract to the lowest calculated and responsive bidder. Kung nag-procure tayo ng goods, infra, at kung nag-procure naman tayo ng consulting services, the recommendation for award was done already by the BAC to the highest rated and responsive bidder. So once in-approve ni Hope, wala na po ang role ng back, hindi na sila mag-a-appear in quadrant 4. So who is responsible therefore in quadrant 4? Dito kasi sabi nga natin, ang signatory ng ating contract are the Hope and the winning bidder. So responsibility na ngayon ng ating local chief executive with the assistance of the end user unit. Sinong end user unit? Yung dito sa umpisa. The same end user unit. With the assistance of other key players. And sino-sino itong other key players that can help in ensuring na tama ang nai-implement natin na mga programa, tama ang nasusunod. Anong document ang magiging Bible dito ng ating Hope and end user in the implementation side? Again, yung document naging na-produce natin in quadrant 3, and that is the contract. So what are the general conditions of the contract? Ano yung mga special conditions of the contract? Yan ngayon ang titingnan, magiging reference natin in quadrant 4. Especially in overseeing the implementation, kung baga sa delivery, kung goods ito, ano yung items delivered in terms of quantity and quality dimension. Tech specs as we call it. So, inspection committee plays an important role in quadrant 4. Inspection and Acceptance Committee as required by the Commission on Audit. Another, yung ating mga people in the accounting office, si accountant, si cashier, also plays an important role in quadrant 4 to ensure that we are able also to release payment if documents are complete, because again, we cannot release payment unless all are inspected and accepted. So malaki ang role dito ng ating mga inspection committee to correlate with the people in the accounting. Okay? And after which, titingnan na natin, and na ba talaga after natin nabayaran? So meaning, paid na si supplier, paid na si contractor, tapos na ba talaga yung ating procurement undertaken? Successful ba ang ating procurement activity sa LGU? The answer will depend kung ano ang magiging result. Ang magdidetermine whether na-satisfied ba talaga or hindi will be who? Who will be that person that will say satisfied ang ating procurement as identified earlier, as we planned? Sino yun? Again, si end user unit. And that is why, as I have emphasized earlier, the role of the end user unit is very, very important to ensure na all that we plan are really the need of the LGU. Hindi po tayo magbibili ng hindi pangangailangan, at kung ano yung kailangan natin at na-describe natin properly, na planned properly, magiging smooth sailing dito sa quadrant 3, hoping na wala na tayong may encounter na mga delay in the procurement, magiging easy ang execution natin, ang implementation natin. And it will result again to satisfaction of the need. Okay? So, I hope that with this diagram, nakita po natin ang bigger picture, na-understand po natin ang buong nangyayari, kabuuhan na proseso that happens in an agency when it comes to procurement. Now again, let me emphasize that later on we will go back to the very basic portion, which is quadrant 1 and quadrant 2, because this should be being undertaken by our LGUs as we start to prepare our budgets. Kasi nga nandito ang first link natin. If we are saying procurement planning has to be linked to the budget process, dito natin yan makikita. Okay? Sige. So moving on. As manifested in the diagnostic study done by the GPPB, ito ang nakita na conclusion. Indeed, medyo mahina nga tayo sa pagpaplano. Mayroon tayong magagaling na mga planning officers, designated planning officers in the various agencies of government. But when it comes to the planning on what to procure, it is something that has to be continued to be provided na technical assistance sa ating mga end user units. So hindi lang ito nakafocus sa planning officer. Okay? Iba kasi ang horizon, iba ang focus ng planning direction ng ating mga provincial, city, municipal planning, anong tawag natin sa kanila? Local Planning Development Officer, di po ba? MPDC, City Planning Development Officer, Municipal, Provincial Planning Development Officer. This is something special, something technical. Kaya hindi lang siya nakafocus sa ating mga planning officers. But of course, malaki ang role ni planning officer dito, ni MPDC, ni Provincial City Planning Officer, kasi nga kung ano yung mga priority programs, projects, activities ng ating LGU that are appearing in your AIP. Remember, gumagawa tayo muna ng annual investment program na nagiging reference natin later on sa paggawa ng budget proposal. Sila ang nakakaalam, meaning the Secretariat of the Local Development Council, which is the MPDC office, becomes the Secretariat, and they have that document with them. Mas alam nila yung technicality naman doon sa mga priority PPAs ng LGU. When it comes to cascading all these priority PPAs, spreading this out to the various departments, kinakalat na natin kasi kaninong programa ito sa agriculture, kaninong programa ito, sino ang mag-implement nito, si health, si social welfare. So ngayon, bababa na tayo doon sa level ng mga various departments to do the procurement planning side. Okay, I hope you are imagining that, na-visualize po natin. And in that area, ito yung mga nakita na kakulangan sa mga ahensya ng gobyerno. Sa planning side, lumalabas, mahina tayo, medyo poor ang ating planning, or maybe nga to some extent, baka talagang walang kaplano-plano. When it comes to procurement planning, hindi naman yung walang kaplano-plano na walang AIP, walang ELA, kasi mayroon, sigurado yan. Mayroon yan, for sure. But when it comes to the PPMP, okay, baka nga mayroon PPMP, pero the quality, the substance is wanting. Kaya ito ngayon ang tututukan natin. Along cost estimates, nakita na medyo poor. So when we say poor, baka ibig sabihin nito, mababa ang ating mga ABC, hindi tugma, hindi siya akma doon sa text specs na write natin. Baka may mismatch. When I say mismatch, we need to buy high-end, for example, high-end laptop. Baka naman yung cost niya as provided in the budget ay kulang. Kaya hindi rin tayo makabili. Kaya nga nagkakaroon ng delay or nagkakaroon ng failure sa procurement. Okay? So we will address this by enhancing the capacities of our end user units to do text specs writing, to write text specs, para hindi na maging problematic ang ating pag-write ng text specs, at ang cost estimate maging also enough or sufficient sa ating, kasi di ba, what will dictate what? Ano yung dapat nauuna na determine natin? Diba, dapat alam natin yung text specs bago natin alamin magkano ang magiging cost nito. Correct? So text specs first before we determine the cost. And yung paggawa ng ating mga PR were identified to also be causing delay. So apparently, ito yung mga previous practices na hopefully hindi na ngayon nagiging nake-carry until the present. But somehow siguro mayroon pa rin ang procurement ng ating BAC nagiging reactive pa rin, meaning naghihintay sila ng mga PR from the various end user units. Question, kailangan ba talaga hintayin natin yung PR from the end user unit bago yung BAC mag-procure? The answer is no. Kaya itong 22%, sigurado bababa na ito sa mga next round of a diagnostic study that GPPB will be undertaken using the APCPI tool. Okay? Sige, so let's move on. Again, itong nakita natin na mga challenges causing delays and failures in procurement, we're basically in quadrant 1 and 2. And again, as you have said, 50% or even more. Kasi tingnan natin dito sa diagram. Mayroon dito low number of bidders, 22%. Tingnan natin, ano kaya yung mga reason ng bidders? Bakit ayaw nila sumali sa government procurement? Would you know na common reasons ni bidders, sasabihin nila, ang gulo kasi nila, walang klaro, so planning pa rin yan. Hindi sila sure ano ba yung gusto nilang bilhin, magulo, paisa-isa yung hinihinging document. That's red tape again. So a result again of a poorly planned procurement. Okay? Uncommon, matagal tayo magbayad. That's the branding na dapat by now, little by little, nawawala na sa picture sana. Okay? Sana ang picture ngayon ng bidders sa government is magaling sila na buyer. Okay? At when we say magaling sila na buyer, we are able to plan well our procurement undertaken, successful, hindi magulo, walang mga motion for recon, walang mga protest left and right, at walang mga anong tawag nito, delays even in the payment. So happy lahat, meaning happy si buyer, the LGU, satisfied yung need nila, happy din si supplier. Nabayaran din siya sa tamang oras. Okay? Yan ang ating gustong mangyari, kaya we will address itong 50% of the failures attributed to poor planning. Or the worst, no planning at all. Okay? So sige, let's move on. Let's now go to the basic questions. Ano nga ba ang ating gagawin so that we can really do a more thorough procurement planning? Okay, so as shown here, there are simple question and answers portion. Parang beauty pageant, parang Miss Universe na mayroon tayong questions that are prepared. Ito yung talagang ready questions that need to be answered. Need to be answered by whom? By the end user units. And who will do this procurement planning again? All the end user units. Okay, so this would therefore be a simultaneous activity that will be done by the various end user units. So when will this be done? Very timely. As we are now talking, as we are now doing this lecture, we are already starting the budget preparation process for LGUs. Okay? Nag-issue na po ang aming office, DBM, ng budget call. Right? Budget call for local government units, and you were already given the indicative NTA for 2023. So meaning, alam nyo na more or less how much ang marireceive ninyo from the national government from the NTA share. And also, by now, yung treasurers natin, yung ating local finance committee composed of the treasurer, the budget officer, the MPDC, more or less, sana by now, we are now September, right? Ay nakagawa na kayo ng certified statement of income, estimated revenues as basis, also to check later on the estimated expenditures. Because again, as I've said earlier, the budget of the LGU is both an estimate of revenues and estimate of expenditures or estimate of appropriation items. So with that information now, you can already proceed, or even prior to that, sana nagawa na itong pagsagot nitong mga questions by the various end user unit. Kasi gagawa na rin sila ng kanilang mga department budget proposal. Sige, mag-sample tayo. First question. What do we need to buy? Ano ba ang kailangan natin bilhin? So, we defined kanina, we will procure for what we need. So go back to your basic mandate. Ano kang office? Health ka ba? Ano yung need ng health office? Because definitely magvavary yan sa need ng social welfare office. Magvavary yan sa need ni engineering office, right? Need ni agriculture office. So wala ditong copying. Wala ditong kopyahan. Maybe to some extent, may common kayo na need. At ano itong common na need? Ito yung mga office supplies. Ito yung mga what we call na needs ng lahat ng opisina for you to carry out your mandate. But there are also, as I've said, peculiar needs. So, mag-example ako ng common. Sabihin na natin laptop or computers, right? Kasi under the new normal, as we embrace nitong, we are still into pandemic, hindi pa rin tayo free from COVID, at mayroon na naman another virus, nitong monkeypox. So meaning, magiging dapat resilient ang ating mga LGUs to live with any possibility. Kung kaya kailangan lahat ng opisina ay ready ng mga equipments like computers to ensure na we can carry on still work regardless kung saan tayo. Kung makakapunta tayo sa office, good. Kung hindi, dahil may mga protocols, may quarantine, may mga health issues, we stay home, we can still work. Okay? So, computer. Ito ang pinaka-ano ngayon, under the new normal. Now, when we say computer, hindi pa rin tayo sure. Ano ba talaga specifically na kind ng computer? So, we go further to defining what kind of computer. Is it a desktop or is it a laptop? So, here, what to buy will guide us to the specifics. Okay? Hindi yung sa kana natin i-agree kung desktop ba yan o kung laptop ba yan. As we plan, again, budget prep ngayon, as we plan what we will buy, clear na tayo. Clear as to what kind of computer. So very clear. Now, anong consideration dito? As I've said, ito nga, yung direction, ano yung reason, ano yung function ng laptop, dapat alam natin. Dahil nga, sinabi natin, these are our needs. Need for what? Various offices has different needs. At in a particular office, iba-iba din yung need ng laptop. Right? From employee to employee, in a particular office, pwede din magbago ang functionality ng paggamit ng laptop. Right? Okay. So, medyo hindi gaano pa siya mahirap sagutin. Let's go to the next question. How many in terms of quantity? Ilan ba ang kailangan natin bilhin na laptop? So, are there other information that you should know before you answer to this question? Di ba, mayroon? Ano yung mga important information that that office has to know first before answering the question, how many? Number one, could be, ilan ba tayo na empleyado dito sa opisina na nangangailangan ng laptop? Yan, that's one. Kasi baka naman bumili kayo ng more than what you need. Remember, limited ang ating resources ng LGU. So, ma-maximize natin. Priority lang ang kailangan natin bilhin. So, number one, ilan ang kailangan, ilan empleyado, at ano yung functionality nito. Another question would be, how many do we have in the inventory right now? Mayroon na tayo, sabihin na natin mayroon na tayo dyan in the inventory 5 na laptop. Are all of these 5 functioning? Baka kasi, oo nga, mayroon tayong 5, but only 1 is functioning. So that's crucial information, ha? That's crucial information. Kasi nga, what do you do with the remaining 4 na hindi nagfa-function? Baka kailangan pa rin natin dito sagutin sa number 1. What do we do with that old? Okay? Baka hindi natin kailangan bumili ng madami na new laptop, but baka kailangan natin mag-upgrade, magpa-repair doon sa old laptops. Do you see the relationship between question 1 and 2? And knowing the inventory? So that's it, no? And the next question, so medyo hindi pa gaano mahirap sagutin ang question number 2. But as we go to question 3, what are the details? Ano yung detalyadong description nitong laptop that we need to buy? This will now require us to do market study. We cannot answer question 3 without checking the market. Kaya nga, market survey or market study, or basically the term used here is, anong tawag nito? Pre-canvas. We do pre-canvas to check. Available, ano ba yung mga available sa market na mga laptops ngayon? Ano yung mga tech specs? Ano yung brand? Ano yung model? We are curious about the brand and the models and the tech specs because later on, when we fill up now the PPMP, we cannot anymore indicate the brand name. Okay, remember that. We cannot anymore indicate the brand name. However, we can use some of the generic technical specifications of a particular brand because that is what we need. Yun ang kailangan natin kasi. So kailangan alam natin anong brand for us to write the tech specs later on. Okay? So, who will do the market survey or the pre-canvas for us to know? And again, the end user unit. And we will go into that later. Mayroon tayong mga discussion on how we do market study. But again, emphasizing that knowing the details, you should not just rely on what are those written in the old PPMP. Okay? Do not rely basically on what are there already. But reality check, do some reality checking kung available pa ba yan sa market or not. Kasi baka nga na-phase out na yan. And if na-phase out na ang particular model, ay wag mo nang pilitin na yun ang gusto mo pa rin bilhin. Otherwise, magiging suntok sa buwan lang ang ating plano, right? Hindi tayo magiging successful later on. Kasi as we do your actual canvas, no supplier will fill up your RFQ kasi nga wala na nga pala sa industry, na phase out na siya. So basically again, no, that's a very crucial point na the need for us to know what are available in the market that can respond to our needs. Next question. Including the cost. Hindi lang yung detalyadong tech specs dapat alamin natin, but also more or less, how much would this cost kaya? So that's the fourth question. And again, do not copy the costs that have been there 2 years ago or a year ago. Again, go back to the market, check, prices fluctuate, right? May mga items, tumataas ang price, may bumababa, may nami-maintain. But remember, we are planning what we will procure a year after from now. So always consider that the price now will definitely change by the time we do actual procurement, right? So common sense, again, common sense is so practical to be applied as we plan what we will procure later on. Kasi somebody said, Ma'am, we did that. We checked the market, pero yung price, hindi pa rin kami nakabili pagdating ng tamang panahon ng aming actual procurement. And then I asked, nag-factor in ba kayo ng cost of money, ng cost of inflation, doon sa current price when you do your market study? At lo and behold, ano yung sagot ng participant in that training? Sabi niya, hindi ma'am, kasi nga kaya kami nag-market study, kasi gusto namin alamin yung current price. At yun ang ginamit namin, kasi current price nga ma'am eh. Sabi ko, yes, current price at the time you conducted procurement planning. But since nagpaplano pa nga lang tayo, ilalagay pa lang natin sa PPMT, aakyat yan sa APP at magiging basis for budgeting, at dadaan pa yan ng proseso. By that time we are able to procure, lumipas na ang ilang buwan or baka nga taon. So common sense pa rin na hindi yung current price ang gagamitin natin as cost, right? But we factor in the cost for money. Okay, so next question. When do we need this particular laptop? Kailan natin kailangan ito bilhin? So definitely the answer to this will not just be in year 2023. Dapat the end user unit has to proactively determine which month of the year in 2023. Because in the PPMP format, naka-breakdown tayo by month. Okay, as we'll show you later on, and I'm sure familiar na kayo nito, na PPMP, naka-breakdown column from January until December. So you will provide an allowance for your procurement arm, which is the BAC, to do the actual procurement. So kung kailangan mo siya ng month of, ano bang mga, usually, ang marami tayong procurement and LGUs, founding anniversary ninyo, fiesta ninyo, mga milestone celebrations ng LGUs. So during those months, dapat nandoon na yun, yung mga kailangan ninyo, right? So provide an allowance, 2 months, 3 months, before that, doon kayo mag-check. Because you know na by that time dumating yung panahon ng fiesta time or whatever, milestone activity of the LGU, sure kayo, nandyan na, nabili na ang mga needs that you will use during your activities. Okay? And the last question, how to source it? Ano yung procurement modality that will be required? So while indicated na yan in that column sa end user unit, again, it is not automatic that it will still be the same modality, right? Kasi kung peculiar yan for your end user unit, it may stand alone in the APP. Pero pag common siya, i-integrate siya, magkakaroon na ngayon ng bulk procurement for the entire LGU, yung modality niya may change, right? From say, small value procurement, kasi konti lang siya, hindi kayo lumampas sa threshold. But ngayon na na-consolidate, lumaki na yung threshold natin, public bidding na ngayon ang magiging modality as recommended by the BAC and as approved by the HOPE. Copy? So here, the bullet statement reminds us here that why do we do procurement planning? Basically, to help us manage our expectations to fulfill our procurement needs. Kasi nga, di ba, sabi natin kanina sa procurement diagram, we have to satisfy the needs. So paano natin satisfy yung need kung hindi natin alam ang detalye, ang details of what we really need? Okay, so that's very basic. Moving on to the next slide. So these are the other objectives of procurement planning. Okay, basically, again, remember our BAC are not full-time BAC members. Remember that. Who are you? Who among you there are members of the BAC? May love life pa ba kayo? may ano pa ba kayo? May time with family? Baka laman lahat na lang, puro procurement na lang. Are you still able to do your inherent duties and responsibilities in the LGU? Dapat the answers, oo naman. Kasi napaplano namin ng mabuti ang aming mga dapat i-procure. And that is basic objective of procurement planning. And to ensure that your overall goal, kaya nga sabi natin, bakit need yan? Sabi natin, bakit kailangan i-procure kasi need? Ano yung goal? Ano yung kailangan natin ma-achieve for that particular procurement? So, ang overall goal natin is to procure that and achieve it more effectively and efficiently. Di po ba? Kailangan both effective tayo and efficient. So when we say effective, doing the right things and doing it right. So meaning, tama yung mga pinupunduhan natin, tama yung mga priority projects. How we procure, baka naman doon tayo nagka-problema. Okay? So both strike the balance, kaya do procurement planning para walang nasasayang na panahon, na pera, na resources, and all. And ito yung mga more important also, walang mangyayari na mga parang anong tawag nito, nagkakaroon ng biglaan. Kailangan ubusin yung pera na na-download sa atin ng mga ahensya ng government, ng national, kasi mag-expire na. Remember, may mga expiry date na ngayon yung pera na nada-download sa LGU coming from the national government. Yung wala na lang expiration ngayon ay ang ating NTA. Pero pag LGSF, remember this ha, participants, pag LGSF, Local Government Support Fund, pag pera na dinownload sa inyo, galing DOH, galing DSWD, magi-expire yan. Kaya all the more important we plan what we will procure out of these resources so that at before mag-expire, hindi yung nabibili kung ano-ano na lang. Yung parang unnecessary na siya. At ang pinaka-worst na could happen, which we have to avoid, baka kailangan i-bidding yan, pero hinahabol na natin na hindi maabutan ng expiration date, nag-shortcut tayo ng modality. Nag-shortcut tayo ng procurement procedure, and that is bawal. Okay? Remember, ang dami ng casualties dito. Marami nang natanggal sa government, na suspend na mga members ng BAC, officials, dahil sa mga mali-maling procedures or circumvention that were done. Okay, of course, may ano naman tayo, due process, but documents will show marami na. So let's not add to the statistics, okay, na masama pa tayo doon sa mga naging casualties, knock on wood. Okay, so dapat wala na itong advanced delivery, wala na yung mga suki system, wala na yung mga unwarranted resort to alternative methods of procurement. Okay, so, and we are able always to observe the value for money concept kasi kulang pa nga ang pera natin. And yung whatever we are able to buy exactly fit what we need. Okay? So remember, it's highlighted here. When we plan, always do it within budgetary context. Maging ano naman tayo also, tawag nito, realistic. Although wala naman, there's nothing wrong to dream big, plan higher, but when it comes to procurement planning, let's be more realistic and ensure that doable itong mga nakaplano natin at defensible. When you say defensible, hindi tayo magkakaproblema later on with COA, particularly with Ombudsman. Okay, so we can retire peacefully at the end of our government service. So, as shown in this diagram, as we speak, ito pa rin ang challenges natin when it comes to procurement planning. Kailangan pa rin i-build up ang mga capacities ng ating end user units, ng ating members of the BAC kasi they come and go, local chief executives come and go, so it follows. Ang ating mga members of the BAC also nagre-rego doon, nagbabago, lalo ngayon, just after election. So may nagre-retire, may kinukuha ni Lord. Marami lang reasons why we have to continue providing. Kaya nga GPPB is always there. We are always here to provide the needed trainings. Okay? And focus more on this. Also, in the crafting of the tech specs, maraming hindi pa nito masyadong technically prepared. And again, as I've said, ang ating mga PPMP should be prepared more quality-wise. Okay? Hindi yung ano na siya, hindi yung after the fact. Meaning, other LGUs prepare PPMPs after the budget is enacted. Hindi po. Dapat before pa. Kasi nga, supporting document nga siya ng ating budget proposal. I-refine lang siya, i-update lang siya as needed once the APRO ordinance is approved, is out. Mayroon ng legislative authorization signed by the local chief executive. Kung may nabago doon sa plano, magbabago din tayo, mag-a-adjust tayo sa ating PPMP and annual procurement plan. Okay? So sige, so let's put a stop to these scenarios, no? Na may mga failure, mga bidding, may mga delays. Sa LGUs kasi, you are in the front line. Di ba? Front line kayo ng government services. So, delays in procurement is equivalent yan to delay in service delivery. Do you agree? Agree, disagree, spin a win. So, delay in procurement is delay in service delivery. Failure to procure will also result to failure to provide service to our constituents. Okay? So, kawawa naman ang ating mga poor community in the LGU na sila ito yung mga nagre-rely, nagwi-wait sa government services. Okay? Yung mga poorest among the poor. At i-avoid natin mag-record itong tinatawag nating ineffective procurement. So sana walang back member dyan who looks like this person in the diagram. Kawawa na to. Hindi tayo nagkaroon ng RA 9184 na to make our lives miserable. In-streamline ang ating procurement law. In-streamline, we use technology to make our life more easier. Okay? So with that, we break for a knowledge check. Back to you, Malu.
Yes, ma'am. And now we're on our first knowledge check. May we ask our technical team to flash the first question? Okay, the question is, procurement planning is the process of identifying which project needs can be best met by procuring products and services within the project organization. Is it A, true, or B, false? All right, so while waiting po, while others answering our poll questions, may we ask again po, or may we remind our participants po, to please change your name using the required format, that is your municipal local government unit name underscore your full name. Kasi as I have seen, may mga iba pong MLGU na MLGU lang yung nakalagay. So please note po na individual po ang ating count sa attendance. Ayan. If you have also have time, please do check your message in our Zoom chat box. Baka po may mga nagme-message from our secretariat too. All right? And we'll be closing the poll questions in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Director Laceras, most of the participants with a 96% answered letter A true. Is this the correct answer po?
Yes, very correct. So congratulations to the 96% of our participants who answered correctly. Very good. Congratulations. Indeed, procurement planning is the process by which we determine in advance ano yung makangailangan ng ating agency kasi kailangan successful ang kalalabasan ng ating procurement process. Very well said.
Ayan. Thank you po, Director Laceras. As of the moment, ma'am, time check lang po. It's already 9:46 a.m. po. So we'll be having siguro medyo mabibilis na natin yung mga few slides, ma'am, no? Para maabot natin lunch po. Thank you so much, ma'am. Let's proceed with the session. Thank you.
Sige, let's now move to the procurement planning. And as I've said, this can even start before the budget preparation phase, meaning even before the budget call is issued by the DBM, the various end user units can already do procurement planning. So meaning, as the LGUs is still preparing their AIP, nagko-convene pa lang yung ating mga local development councils at mayroon ng approved AIP, start na kayo gumawa ng PPMP so that when the budget call is out, mayroon na kayong more or less, refinements na lang ang gagawin natin. So anong basis for us to do procurement planning? Is that just a requirement by your resource person right now? Hindi po. It's under Section 7.1 of the IRR, which mandates all procurement agencies to observe this key guidepost as contained in the 2016 IRR. All procurement shall be within the approved budget and should be meticulously, judiciously planned. Just the term used here. It speaks of a process talaga. Hindi talaga pwede kasi pag mag-copy-paste tayo, walang meticulously and judiciously word there that we can practice, right? And consistent with government fiscal discipline measures. So unahin natin yung mga, when we say what is referred to here is itong ating mga expiration ng ating mga funds coming from the national government brought about by the annual cash base para hindi naman tumatagal ang ating mga pera na tutulog sa bangko. Kung humingi kayo ng mga assistance galing sa national, see to it na immediately as it is downloaded to the LGU, ubos agad, nagagamit agad. So ito yung ibig sabihin dito. Considered crucial. So if you are confused, ano nga ba ang need namin? Kasi at times, parang may mga very thin delineation between need and want, di ba? Baka naman want na yan. Anong guidance if we say, kailangan lang natin ilista yung mga need? Those considered crucial to the efficient discharge of your government functions. Ito yung tinatawag natin na mga basic necessities required to the day-to-day operations and in pursuit of the principal mandate. Again, go back to the principal mandate of your particular office. And remember, kailangan natin mag-provide ng allowance for foreseeable emergencies in your APP. Remember, maski pa maganda yung pagkaplano natin, mayroon at mayroon mangyayaring unforeseen or unforeseen contingencies, okay? Or emergency. So dapat naka-provide din yan. Now, to continue, Section 7.2 also of the same IRR provides, ito yung bottom line, general rule. Wala kayong pwedeng mabili na kahit ano if it is not found in the approved annual procurement plan. Alam nyo na to, di ba? Hindi rin kayo pwede makaprovide ng funding in an annual or supplemental budget for a project that is not, for an item that is not in your AIP. The same rule apply here. Hindi kayo makakaprocure, maski pa marami kayong pera, marami kayong cash sa bangko, kung yung item na yan ay wala sa approved annual procurement plan. So if ever it happens na mayroong na identify lang na bagong pangangailangan, bagong need, because of some events, we will modify or prepare first a supplemental annual procurement plan before you do your actual procurement. Okay? Exception lang dito, pag emergency procurement dahil may mga nangyaring biglaan na calamities, knock on wood, no? But if it so happen, wag naman ninyong sabihin, sabi ni Director Laceras, gawa muna ng supplemental APP bago tayo bumili. Hindi po ganon. Immediately procure, meron kayong calamity fund, disaster risk reduction fund, at yung documentation can be done on a later date once na-address na yung emergency need. Copy? Okay? So, sige, next. Sa ating procurement timeline, kanina pinakita na ito sa ating paradigm, but ang ini-emphasize dito are the months. Okay? Are the months for which kailan gagawin. So dito na yung question, when do we do what? Kanina sabi natin what are to be done? Quadrant 1, identify the needs. When do we do that? During budget prep. What months? Ito, between January to March. At ito yung period na nag-AIP preparation kayo. Nag-assess quadrant 2 between what period? Ano yung phase of the budget process? Budget preparation still. What month? Between about March to April. Until, continue tayo until July or October kasi dito yung submission ng budget sa ating sanggunian, October 16, July sa national government. Sinasubmit ni Presidente sa Congress, July until August. May 30 days si Presidente. So for 2023, sinabmit na ni Presidente sa Kongreso. For LGUs, until October pa this year. Nasa September pa lang tayo ngayon, di ba? So, nasa budget prep tayo, procurement assessment quadrant tayo ngayon when it comes to LGUs. Right? And then magkakaroon tayo ng adjustment or refinement ng ating pag-finalize ng ating APP comes January of 2023 based on the APRO ordinance for the LGUs. For the national based sa General Appropriations Act. Copy? So here, makikita dito, as I've said, what agency sa budget prep, who issues the budget call, it's the DBM, done na tayo, nakapag-issue na. Gumawa na siguro kayo nito ngayon ng mga budget proposals ninyo, right? So, departments or unit heads, and as we move to the months of, we are now in September. So for the national, meron na tayong NEP, nakasubmit na sa Congress. For the LGU, once mag-submit si Gov, si Mayor, ng kanilang local expenditure program, yan. Ito, ang counterpart ng NEP sa LGU is the local expenditure program. So, mag-uumpisa na ang deliberation or enactment of the APRO ordinance in the case of the LGU. Okay? So, sige, let's move on. How do we ensure the linkage of the procurement process to the budget process? Very important that we are able to do procurement management. Kasi pag hindi natin at hindsight or as a foresight, hindi natin ito ma-manage, magkakaroon ng disconnect dito. magkakaroon ng disconnect dito. So the question could be, how do we do this? So how? Again, through the PPMP and the APP as our supporting documents to the budget proposals. And for the national government, dapat nasa ano siya, trip document. Sa ating LGU, nasa AIP document yan. Okay? So, showing it in another way to emphasize the synchronization, the timing of doing what at what phase of the budget process is shown in this diagram. So, as I've said kanina, procurement planning, quadrant 1 and 2, during budget preparation phase tayo. Okay? And we are here right now for LGUs. Correct? So, ito yung sinasabi ko kanina. We do the actual selection, procurement through EPA during budget authorization. And some of our procurement may wait until the budget execution phase. And definitely, all the implementation, delivery, and performance, kung mga projects yan, will be done during budget execution phase. So this diagram, again, as will emphasize the linkage to operationalize what we have been talking, the need to link procurement process with the budget process. Okay? So sa LGU, ito ang ating 5 na steps ng budget process: preparation, authorization, review, execution, and accountability. Right? Familiar na kayo. The budgeting process sa national, 4 lang. Kasi ang review, ito yung wala sa national, ang budget review naka-built-in siya. Built-in dito sa budget prep, mayroon din dito sa legislation, at mayroon din sa execution and accountability aspect. Okay, so hindi na natin siya i-detalye. Let's move to the PPMP. What is our understanding with what is this document? It is, as I said, prescribed. May template tayo. Ito yung format niya. To be signed by the end user units. Okay. Hindi ito to be approved by the HOPE. Hindi pa ito yung document na i-approve ng HOPE. End user units lang. At ito yung mga columns niya. Ito yung mga questions kanina. What to procure? Ano yan? Column 2. Quantity. Column 3. The column 1 is our AIP code. Okay? Kasi nililink natin sa AIP ang ating budget. Column 3. Column 4 will be the cost. The question number 6 is our modality. Saan dito papasok yung detail, yung text specs? Nandito siya. Attachment ang text specs. Walang column for the text specs, but text specs for each item or project being proposed shall be submitted as part of the PPMP. So in other words, i-attach natin siya. The question on when, timing, dito sa columns na to, i-check. So let's go back. So we consider the PPMP as our guide document. Ito yung, it will provide for an allowance, or it will be the tool that will allow flexibility to optimize utilization of scarce resources. And definitely, if we go through, if we strictly adhere to the PPMP as reference in monitoring the actual implementation, it will minimize the practice of doing shortcuts. So emphasize in this box, who is responsible in preparing the PPMP again? The end user unit. So before maka-fill up si end user unit, gagawa siya ng ito, emphasizing text specs for goods, scope of work for infra, or the TOR for consulting. Okay? These are the column headings. Napakita na natin yan. This is also the manner, the diagram that will show us. Ito yung quadrant 2. Quadrant 2 kanina, di ba? From quadrant 1 dito, end user unit, umakyat tayo sa quadrant 2. So si budget, nag-check, nag-evaluate, backsec, then the back convene, then approve ni head of the procuring entity. So not much question on that, right? Ito yung format. What are the guideposts in identifying the need? To add to what was earlier discussed, go to your core function if you are a department head on agriculture. Ano yung core function mo? At consider historical data for foreseen contingencies. So remember, dapat mayroon tayong ipoprovide na mga allowance for eventual occurrence of these foreseeable emergencies. Remember again, go back to the main purpose why you are doing procurement. Ano yung explanation why you need to procure? What is the overall goal? And what is that particular service that will be addressed? Ano ba yan? Agricultural services ba yan? Health services ba yan? Okay? And consider your strategic directions. LGUs now with the Mandanas ruling, you know that, di ba? Expected magle-level up ang ating service delivery ng LGUs. With the increase in resources brought about by the Supreme Court ruling, so expected again that ang service delivery natin magiging wider at magiging mas madami ang mag-expect ng ating mga services sa LGU. So consider that as part of your procurement directions. Current supply inventory as well as your existing operating needs, maintenance and operating needs. So kung may mga bago kayong na-acquire na equipments, vehicle, consider the maintenance cost of this in your succeeding planning exercise. Okay? So, we all know that for LGUs, ang ating reference when it comes to ABC is our APRO ordinance, right? But when it comes to the conduct of the EPA, wala tayong ABC pa that there is no need for an ABC yet during the EPA. What is needed lang is the LEP, your local expenditure program. So hindi rin kailangan si accountant mag-issue ng CAF. Ano ba yung CAF? Certificate of Availability of Fund, right? Wala pa pong CAF na i-issue during the EPA. Later on na yan, when there is already an APRO ordinance for the awarding, okay? For the awarding of contract. Pero for the procurement to proceed, no CAF is required, okay? Kasi yan pa rin ang common reasons ng mga LCEs bakit hindi sila nakakapag-procure in advance. Okay, let's move on. Ito yung sinabi ko kanina. Need to conduct market study tayo for us to determine the approved budget for the contract. Okay? Or the cost estimate per project, per item. So, remember again, the current price or the current market price plus the value for money after some time, the inflation, the cost of money, because we consider the calendar, the timetable, kung kailan yung procurement gagawin. Now, is it possible na si end user unit hindi niya more or less, wala siyang technical capability to determine the cost? And if yes, can that end user unit call a friend for help? The answer is yes. Okay? Pwede. Magpatulong kayo sa medyo technical person na nakakaalam. So, the TWG can already be your provider of the technical assistance here. Right? So, there are several tools that could be used in estimating the ABC. And we will not be discussing in detail all of this. If you attend a relatively advanced training on procurement, this could be a separate topic by itself. Determination of ABC, another topic, text specs writing. But for now, part lang siya ng procurement planning topic for the whole morning, kaya medyo mabilis tayo konti dito. Okay, so we can cover as many as we can just to give you the bird's eye view of all of this. So let's proceed. Ang pinaka-importante, you should know ano yung advantages, ano yung strengths and weaknesses of each of these, para you will also be able to identify what particular tool you can use on a particular procurement. Kasi this may be good for a particular item of procurement, and the other one will be preferred, and the other one can also be the most preferred. But the most common that we have to understand is this life cycle costing. Life cycle costing reminds us na as we plan what to procure, especially as far as the costing, hindi lang yung tip of the iceberg ang dapat alam natin yung cost. Hindi lang yung ano lang yung nakikita natin. So kung genset yan, hindi lang yung genset ang cost ng genset ang dapat natin i-factor in, but to include the other cost. The other cost could be delivery, freight cost, kasi ang bibigat niyan mga genset. Installation, baka nga pati construction ng powerhouse, kailangan kasama pa dyan kung sino yung service provider. Installation, even the testing itself, even the training sa pag-operate ng genset could be already part of the operating cost. So meaning, ito yung maganda sa procurement planning, na foresee mo na, kasi ano ba yung purpose ng genset? To provide a standby generator in case of power breakdown, right? Mayroon tayong mga service power provider, but in case mag-brown out, ma-destroy siya for ng typhoon, ilang months, ilang weeks wala tayong kuryente. So that genset, that's the goal of your procurement, standby power supply. So for it to function, for your genset to be immediately your source of power, so hindi lang yung procurement of the genset therefore ang kailangan i-cost, but up to, kumpleto. Ito yung sinasabi na kumpleto. So hindi lang tayo maglagay ng procurement of genset therefore, but supply, delivery, installation, testing, commissioning. Others use that term. Commissioning, training of the generator set for it to be functional. See? So in that way, malalaman talaga natin that agencies are doing a more mindful, thorough procurement planning by just looking at their procurement package, how they package their procurement requirements. Hindi yung tigi-tigi, hindi yung piecemeal, but pinag-isipan nila talaga yung kabuuan. Okay? Wag lang muna siguro disposal kasi matagal-tagal pa naman natin kakailanganin i-dispose yan. So saka na natin i-factor in yung cost. Especially that the budget naman, we pay the budget on a yearly basis. Okay, so we move on to the another part of procurement planning is on tech specs, because again, as I've emphasized earlier, responsibility also of the end user unit to write tech specs. What are the tips that we can share with our end user units for them to write tech specs? Okay, we have here several. Okay, some requirements kasi are mandatory. So kung mga mandatory requirements yan, like ano ba yung example ng mandatory requirements sa laptop? Internet ready. Ayan, so be specific and be detailed as possible. Dapat may camera siya. Kasi kung nag-virtual tayo like this, nakikita tayo sa camera. Okay. So, in which case, ano yung mga specs natin sa camera, sa internet connectivity? We can indicate that as a mandatory requirement. Would there be tech specs that may not really be a mandatory requirement? Like color? So you need not indicate a color. Regardless of the color, what is important, the laptop has to function. So you can be flexible as possible without compromising the very objective or purpose of that particular item. Okay? The size, the measurement, the size. Can the size be a mandatory requirement? If not, you can just indicate parang anong tawag ito? A scale. A scale. Wag naman absolute na sasabihin natin 14 inches width ang ating screen. Kasi baka mag-difference ng konti lang diyan, ay hindi ka na maka-award. Kayo na back, you cannot award kasi hindi exactly 14 inches. That's an example of being flexible as possible. So maybe a range of 13 to 14 inches. That's an example, okay? State a requirement of fact only one time and avoid duplication. So don't be very repetitive, okay? Just to, kasi gusto lang natin siguro i-emphasize. Now, specify, very important ito. Specify what you need. So what, ha? Remember the what, not the how. Kasi ang how, si industry na, si supplier na ang maghahanap ng what we need. Okay? Just focus tayo when we write text specs on what we need. Describe it. Describe it. And in the description, may tips din tayo to focus on what dimension. Okay? Explain the intent and purpose. At saka, remember, always observe the 5 governing principles on procurement, one of which is what? Competitiveness principle. So meaning, everything as we plan, we are always providing an allowance na hindi tayo nagdi-directly allude to a particular supplier or bidder, kaya nga bawal ang branding. So look to increase competition and not to stifle competition. So we have here some also guideposts. Is it possible na ang ating end user units doesn't have the technical expertise to write text specs? The answer could be yes, kasi hindi pa nga sila na-train. So what do? Call a friend again. Consult stakeholders. Ask your TWG. Kung hindi available within the agency, can you hire services outside? The answer is also yes. Okay? So moving on, are we already observing also adapting the green public procurement? Because we have to also, especially at our LGU level, marami tayong mga need along the CSE, common use supplies, and even the non-CSEs that are already compliant to the green specifications. Okay? So we can indicate that as we procure these items, ito ang ating i-follow na GPPB Resolution 25-2017. Okay? So when we go to the method of procurement, there will be another discussion. You have another speaker here, but be aware that the general rule on procurement is public bidding, and we can be allowed to use any of the 5 alternative modes subject to compliance to certain conditions. Okay? So, ano naman ang relevance nitong PR? Kanina, one of the identified reason for delays in procurement or failure of bidding is the late submission of the PR. Now, is the bug in your case? Again, this is my question. Do we really need to wait for the PR for the bug to do their procurement? The answer is not necessary. Hindi kailangan reactive ang procurement ni BAC. But kailangan ba ang PR? Maybe yes, as required by COA. Okay? But the BAC can trigger the submission of the PR as soon as the APP is finalized. Once there is the APRO ordinance, alam na natin ano yung level on a per department. So pag nag-final si BAC ng APP, I mean si BACSEC, at nag-final na rin si BAC ng mga procurement timelines, yung milestone procurement timelines. Meaning, by bulk procurement ang gagawin ngayon ng BAC. So bakit ka pa maghihintay ng PR for you to proceed to procure? Unless these are peculiar to that particular department. So, okay, so meaning, the BAC can trigger the requirement for all end user units to submit their PRs as they submit their final PPMP. Okay, para hindi na piecemeal. Kasi ito lang naman ang pinaka-general rule natin dito. In no way that end user unit submit their PR ahead of the approved PPMP. So kung may mga kailangan bilhin ang ating end user unit, titingnan niya, babalikan niya yung kanyang PPMP. Pag nandoon yun, then he can submit the PR. In fact nga, early on, hindi yung later on. Okay? Pag wala doon sa PPMP, ano yung process natin? Mag-modify ka muna. Prepare ka muna ng supplemental PPMP, and that will trigger also a supplemental APP. And once it's approved, remember, ina-approve pa yung APP natin ng ating HOPE, then saka ka mag-PR. Copy? Hindi yung mag-submit ka na ng PR, wala pa palang PPMP at wala pa ngang APP. That's the message of this diagram here. Okay, so let's move on to another knowledge check break.
All right, we're now down to our second knowledge check. May we ask our technical team to flash the second question? The question is, who must consider the different cost components in determining PBC? Is it A, TWG, B, BAC Secretariat, C, end user, or D, all of the above? Okay, may we request our participants to choose your answer in the Zoom polling flash on your screen. So while waiting for the answer of the majority of our participants po, I would like to remind everyone po that if you still have questions in your mind, feel free to post it in our Zoom chat box so that we can also include them during our open forum. And for our Facebook Live viewers, you may also join or participate by posting your comments in our comment section page po. I think most of the participants now are done choosing their answer. I'll be closing the poll questions in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. May we request to share the results? All right. So medyo dikit, ma'am. Actually, siguro yung iba pag lang naisip na all of the above na lang, no? Kasi ganun tayo pag estudyante, pag hindi sure all of the above. But most of the participants pa rin, ma'am, is answered end user letter C with a percentage of 50%, seconded by letter D, all of the above 45%, and 5% po, letter B, BACSEC. So maybe you know the correct answer for this, Director Laceras.
Okay, so the responsibility to determine the different cost components in determining the ABC is our end user units. That's the main responsibility of our end user units. So tama naman sila. Pwede lang silang magpatulong sa TWG if kulang sila sa expertise. So meaning, hindi naman agad-agad si TWG ang magsasabi na kanyang responsibility yon unless they are requested by the end user unit. Okay? So, ayan. Hope it's clear.
Opo. So, hope everyone po is clear na kung kanina hindi na tayo magtuturuan kung sino ba talaga yung mag-determine po ng ABC. So, it's very clear na end user po since tayo po ang gagamit ng project. Okay? So, let's resume na po with our lecture. Director, take it away po.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to the APP now. Tapos na tayo sa PPMP. Ito na ngayon ang we were saying na initially will be consolidated by the BACSEC in quadrant 2 for approval, for determination of the modality by the BAC and approval by the HOPE. So ano nga ba? Ano yung mga kailangan i-consider natin in the consolidation of the APP? As emphasized here, we have to consider the 1-year planning perspective. Okay, so meaning, kaya nga annual procurement plan. So bulk talaga. That's the strategic, the more strategic way to consolidate the various PPMP is put together all that are common. Kailangan for the whole year kasi nga 1 year ang planning horizon natin, and always consider provide allowance for emergency or contingency, and determine also the schedule. Okay, so kung naka-schedule siya, again as I've said, alam na natin we have to provide an allowance for the BAC to do the procurement. Hindi kung kailangan June lang siya ipo-procure, di ba? So ito ang magiging Bible ng ating LGU. Ang ating annual procurement plan becomes the reference document in its prescribed format, again as I've said, by the GPPB, that contains all our procurement activities as planned for the whole year. So Bible natin siya, at hindi siya meaning ang ating APP is based on the approved APRO ordinance. Now, can this be can our APP be updated? How often? How often? As the need arises. Ito ang nakalagay dito. Okay? A review and updating of the individual PPMPs and APP shall be done regularly, at least once every 6 months, or as often as necessary. So meaning, hindi kailangan once every 6 months, so pwede siguro quarterly, right? But because hindi naman siya, parang open-ended siya, as often as necessary, baka naman monthly, nagkakaroon pa tayo ng supplemental PPMP and supplemental APP. Parang na-defeat na yung purpose ng planning natin, di po ba? So ideally, to us or to me, quarterly could be a reasonable timeline for us to update our PPMPs and annual procurement plan. Kasi nga napaka-volatile ng ating work environment. Ang bilis magbago ng mga pangyayari, right? So even if we plan ahead, mayroon at mayroon mga nangyayari na hindi natin na-plano or hindi natin na-anticipate. So, there are also tips that are provided for the BACSEC to do a more strategic consolidation of the PPMP. And this is a way of showing it. So kung may tatlo tayong PPMP, akyat lahat yan, di ba, kanina sa diagram natin sa budget office. Ito, maybe this is already a supplemental one. Kung supplemental APP na siya or PPMP, meaning hindi siya during budget prep, so pwedeng hindi siya dadaan sa budget office except kung talagang walang fund identified. So dadaan sa budget office pa rin. Pero kung may fund identified ang end user unit, most likely ang common na fund source nito during execution phase na savings mismo ng end user unit. Halimbawa, yung original project nila is 10M. Yung contract cost is only 8M. May 2M silang na-save from that particular procurement. So pwede nilang gawan ng PPMP equivalent to 2 million for another procurement activity. In that case, diretso na siya sa BACSEC para magawan na ng supplemental APP and i-approve ni HOPE. Okay, so yun lang ang pwedeng hindi dadaan sa budget office. But during budget prep, kailangan talaga dadaan sa budget office. Now, let's move forward. Imagine ngayon, mayroon na tayong APRO ordinance. Kasi LGU tayo, right? Mayroon na tayong appropriation ordinance. So, who will now, what will trigger the finalization of the annual procurement plan? Ano na ngayon ang proseso sa pag-finalize? Kanina, yung pinakita kong diagram, yung paggawa ng indicative annual procurement plan from the end user down to the hope. Ngayon, mayroong role si budget officer dito. Kasi as the budget officer, as soon as the APRO ordinance is out, signed into law, effective na, pumasok na yung effectivity niya, first working day of the year, titingnan ni budget officer yung level. Nagbago ba yung level ng APRO ordinance vis-a-vis the LEP, yung local expenditure program? May nagbago ba sa levels? Kung wala naman, assuming wala, kasi lahat nag-cooperate, nag-support, si Vice, yung lahat ng sanggunian, sinuport yung executive budget proposed ni LCA. So, walang babaguhin except lang ipa-finalize lang siya. Kasi yung label natin originally was indicative. Di po ba? Indicative lang siya based on the budget on the APRO ordinance. So yun lang yung label. So the same totals. But in some instances, kung nagkakaroon ng mga reduction in some items of the proposed budget, posible ba yan na may mga na-reduce? The answer is yes. Especially kung may nakita si sanggunian na mayroong mga mandatory na kulang, dinagdagan. Kasi kailangan i-fully provide yung mga, say, not less than 20% for development project, not less than 5% for the calamity fund. So may mga kakulangan doon sa proposed budget. Responsibility ngayon ng sanggunian maghanap para i-correct yung kulang, dagdagan nila. So saan sila possible kukuha? Most likely, hindi naman sila magbabawa sa PS kasi sweldo yan. Doon sila magbabawas possibly sa other items of APRO which may affect your procurement, your plan to procure. So doon magkakaroon ngayon ng mga adjustment as the case may be. Okay? So si Budget Office ngayon ang magbibigay ng feedback at who will give the go signal to the ano tayo. So yun. So dito tayo magbawa sa other office lang muna. At ano yung office na yon? So kailangan ng policy direction yan, policy directive from the local chief executive at yun naman susundin ni budget office. Copy? At no one, parang walang magrereklamo ng mga department heads sa gagawin ni budget. Kasi nga guided naman si budget office ng policy direction na in-issue ni local chief executive. Kaya ganun ka very important yung mga policy direction. Okay? Then based on that, magiging smooth sailing ang pag-finalize ng mga various PPMPs by the various end user unit. At balik siya sa BACSEC for the consolidation again of the final annual procurement plan. And eventually, balik pa rin siya sa local chief executive for approval. Okay? For approval by the local chief executive ang ating final annual procurement plan. Okay, so sige, move on tayo. Now this diagram will tell us some tips for our BACSEC secretariat. At least kayo, kung hindi man kayo BACSEC, whatever your role in your LGU, at least you can help your BAC secretariat do a more strategic consolidation of the PPMP. Check for items which can be merged, kagaya ng sinabi ko kanina. Baka naman, separate yung sa PPMP yung procurement of the genset. Tapos mayroon din procurement mayroon din si engineering construction of the powerhouse. Baka mayroon din another doon yung training arm, separate training for the operator of the genset. So pag ganun, Tapos separate na naman yung installation. So pag ganon, if this can be merged, that can just be one procurement undertaking, right? Supply, delivery, installation, commissioning, testing, and all. So yun. Also by mode of procurement, so lahat ng for bidding, one APP, pag isahin siya, another lahat ng SVP, lahat ng for ano pa ba? Lahat ng kailangan bilhin sa PS, procurement service natin. And these are for CSEs, yun, separate din siya. Okay? Nandito rin siya, common use. Separate si CSE kasi una natin i-check kung available sa procurement service depot. At kung hindi naman, pwede kayo mag-resort to the procurement outside the PS. Ito yung shopping B natin. Okay? At also by source of funds and by type of procurement. Alam naman natin, di po ba, na we have 3 types of procurement: goods, services, infrastructure, and consulting. Okay, so we will not go into more details on that. Move on to the column headings of our APP as shown here. There are in fact instructions pa. So napakadali siyang sundan. Okay? Hindi naman siya ganon kahirap. At ito yung sinasabi ko na may schedule tayo ng procurement timelines. So, hindi na dapat magiging reactive ang ating BAC to be procuring only after the PR is received from the end user unit. Hindi na. Kasi may procurement timeline na kayo, may naka-schedule kayo na bulk procurement on certain items. So, if this is if this involved 10 end user unit, you prompt the 10 end user unit to submit the PRs because mag-uumpisa na yung BAC mag-procure for the 10 departments. So ganun yun, ha? Hindi yung bili lang muna tayo ngayon for end user unit 1 kasi sila pa lang yung may PR. Pag submit naman ng end user unit 2 next month, bili na naman tayo for. So nagiging piecemeal ang procurement, right? At hindi yan efficient way of doing procurement. Nagiging inefficient tayo. Sige. Sa preparation ng supplemental, which possible talaga to happen, even though no amount of good planning can prevent a possible supplemental APP. So we go back again to the same process. Start from the end user unit. So kung sinong end user unit sila ang magagawa, at the same back go through the BACSEC and the BAC and up to the whole. Again, if the funding source is not clear, is not sure, daan ka rin sa budget office. Okay? So these are simply guidelines na lang in the filling out of the APP. So hindi na natin ito isa-isahin. Siguro for the BACSEC na to na more training, more I'm sure naman yung mga BACSEC natin are very familiar with this. May instructions dyan in the filling up. Let's move on. For the CSE, ito yung mga kailangan ninyo fino-forward sa procurement service of the DBM. Now, ngayon, we have a new management. Alam natin ang mga issues that had been thrown or pinagdadaanan ng ating procurement service. But under the new management, may mga changes that are being introduced to correct, to prevent the same scenario that had happened in the past. So it's not still a reason for our agencies not to procure from PS simply because may mga issues na hindi pa natatapos. Hindi po acceptable na reason yan. So, okay. Especially now, the new management is going back to the basic mandate of the procurement service, which means hindi na sila ngayon nag-entertain ng mga requests from other agencies for them to procure non-CSE. So ang tututukan ngayon ng ating PS is to procure the CSE needs ng gobyerno, ng buong gobyerno. So tutok sa common use supplies and equipment para more back to the mandate sila, at the same time matulungan yung mga ahensya ng gobyerno may streamline ang procurement at ma-minimize ang turnaround time kasi hindi na nila ibibid, hindi na sila magsha-shopping, didiretso na lang sila sa PS as part of the negotiated procurement modality. Okay? Sige, so ito yung format. Medyo may different template tayo na sinusunod for filling up the APP for CSE. Okay? Just be aware na may separate siya na format. Huwag na natin isa-isahin yan. Let's rather discuss the early procurement activity short of award. Kaya tinawag siya early procurement regime kasi relatively bago ito na reform in government procurement. Dati, hindi tayo talaga nakakapag-procure pag wala pang APRO ordinance, correct? Sa LGU. In fact, prior to the 2016 IRR, wala tayong EPA na sinasabi. In the national government, wala rin masyado tayong pinag-uusapan dati na EPA. But because of the annual cash-based, a reform along the public financial management, yung bigger reform initiatives ng ating government along public financial management. Kasi nakikita, ang both national and local, ang daming project na nagti-take time. Matagal matapos ang mga proyekto ng gobyerno, both national and local. Ano kaya yung problema dito sa procurement side at sa funding side? So nagkaroon ngayon ng mga reforms. Ngayon sa national government, 2 years na lang ang validity ng appropriation, including allotment. Hindi na pwede, nag-i-expire na yung pera ni national government after 2 years for MOOE and capital outlay. For the PS, yung personal services natin, 1 year validity period. Dapat lang naman. Kasi these are for salaries, services rendered. So every time, every month, nagbabayad tayo ng sweldo. However, when we go down to the funds for the projects, nakita nga na tumatagal ang mga implementation horizon. So, introduce the annual cash-based. LGU ngayon, slowly ini-introduce na rin natin ang annual cash-based. Kaya kasama na rin kayo sa na-cover ng early procurement activity short of award. And you will please be guided with GPBB Reso 14-2019 here. What is really EPA? Okay, let's take a look. It refers to the conduct of procurement activities starting from the posting. Okay, actually, I would rather also include here pre-proc. Very important din muna yan na nagkakaroon muna ng pre-proc, pre-procurement conference before posting. Okay, mayroong hindi naka-mute na microphone. Paki-mute lang muna. We will go into open forum later on. Okay, so we will be allowed to do posting, and in the posting, dapat naka-emphasize na early procurement ito so that alam ng bidders na sasali na ay wala pala itong award na mangyayari agad-agad within the next few months. Kasi ano pala ito? EPA pala ito. So ang award pala nito will be early next year. So kasama siya sa i-emphasize in the bid docs itself sa posting. Okay? Until recommendation of the BAC. So mag-i-end ang ating EPA by the time the BAC submitted the recommendation to award. So mag-i-stop ang ating counting dito. Kumbaga, pwede nga hindi mo na i-forward ni BAC yung kanilang BAC reso recommending award, or pwede din i-forward na nila pero walang action muna yung ating hope. Okay? Kasi the hope will only do the awarding in the following fiscal year. Meaning, nakapend yung ating action until approval of the APRO ordinance. So, maski pa siya ma-approve in December, ang effectivity naman niya is still January, so still wait for January before the award can be made. Okay? So, what's the benefit? Why conduct EPA? We have here in the diagram, number 1, timely implementation of project. So kung nag-EPA tayo while waiting for the budget to be approved by the sanggunian, at yung awarding will just happen sometime January, so January awarding agad, right? So makakaumpisa immediately yung ating projects. At dahil nakaumpisa ng maaga, matatapos din siya ng maaga, right? So meaning, the earlier we start the project, the earlier also we can finish. Unlike in the past, nung wala pa tayong EPA, yung bidding pa lang gagawin third quarter. Minsan hanggang fourth quarter, nagbibidding pa lang tayo. At natapos na lang ang taon, walang gumalaw na pera. Kasi nga, hindi pa na-award. Or kung na-award man, na-obligate pa lang. Libro lang yan, nasa libro pa lang ang obligation. Walang disbursement, so walang economic activity. Right? Hindi pa naumpisahan yung proyekto. So that is one example na in that particular case, the need to reform our procurement policies. Okay? Kaya inallow ngayon yung EPA. And in that case, it will also help effectively manage our procurement projects. Kasi earlier maumpisahan, earlier matatapos, so madali natin ma-manage within the year mismo. Hindi yung after the fact na lumilipas ang ilang taon muna bago natin na-cure kung mayroon mang mga defects. Okay? So, covered ba talaga ang LGUs dito? Take a look at the guidelines. Yes. Even our state universities and colleges, GOCCs, GFIs, covered po ng early procurement activity. Okay? At ito yung ating references dito when it comes to the reference when to do the awarding. When these documents will already be officially issued. Okay. So here, ano yung mga procurement modality that are subject to EPA? Covered siya pag doon sa indicative annual procurement plan ninyo, take a look at those that are subject for competitive bidding. Diba may column tayo sa procurement modality, sa indicative APP. You take a look at that. All of those na naka-indicate for public bidding, lahat na yun, pwede na natin i-subject to the EPA. Okay? Lahat na yun. Sana maging general practice na nga ang pag-conduct ng EPA. Hindi lang yung parang resorted to for exceptional cases. Hindi. Magiging general practice na siya. In the national government, it is already a general practice. In the LGU, it should also be already a general practice. Lalo na at most of your projects are funded LGSF. Local from national government, downloaded to LGU. Local Government Support Fund. 2 years ang validity period lang natin dyan. Assuming man, funded siya IRA or NTA ngayon. Ano yung specific fund source natin for projects sa LGU? Di po ba yung 20% development fund? right? 20% development fund. Kung magkano yung NTA natin, you extract 20% of that, you should devote that, allocate that for development projects. So kung for development projects siya, edi dapat immediately din ipoprocure yan. Para nga may development na mangyari. Hindi yung matagal, naka-deposit muna sa bangko, nag-i-earn muna ng interest ng ilang years bago ginagamit yung pera. Usually, ito yung na-observe natin, ha, bato-bato sa langit, ha. Ang tamaan, huwag kayong magalit. Wala naman akong specific LGU na inaalyud dito. Ano munang nangyayari sa LGUs? Kinukolekt, iniipon muna yung mga dina-download, pinapa-earn muna ng interest sa bangko. Kasi na-release siya right after election. Okay na, hindi mo na kailangan muna ngayon magpapo. Sorry for the term, ha? Ipon lang muna. Pag malapit na ang election, so meaning, ngayon, right after election, don't tell me hindi kayo magpo-procure kasi right after election pa lang. So, tulog muna until next year, 2023, until next year, 2024. Kailan lalabas yan? Kailan sabay-sabay magpa-project? 2025 kasi election year. I'm sure may mga naka-observe sa inyo ng ganon scenario. Hindi lang po ako. Okay? So, it defeats the purpose therefore. Kasi nga development fund for development projects. So, maski pa hindi siya nag-expire ang validity ng ating NTA, incumbent upon us, local leaders, okay? Local chief executives, to immediately, kasi every year gumagawa naman tayo ng budget, bakit natin iniipon muna yung pera? Unless, nag-iipon ka kasi kulang. But it should not be the case. Pwede ka naman mag-by phasing. Iba-by phase natin. Kasi yung pera mo ngayon, nakagawa ka ng, say, one-story building. Kung yung pera na yan, inipon mo lang at mag-wait ka ng next year, dadagdagan mo pa yan para two-story na. Yung pera mo last year, baka hindi na siya makagawa the following year ng another one story kasi tumaas na yung presyo. See? So maganda pa rin yung pinaplano mo. Gradually, you have a 3-year term. Kayo na mga local chief executives, you have a 3-year term. So year 1, may nagawa ka na. From your year 1 budget. Year 2, mayroon ka pang madadagdag. Sabihin na natin phase 2. Year 3, mayroon ka na naman another phase. So natapos mo yung term mo, may malaki kang natapos na project. Kasi inumpisahan mo yearly yung ating mga pag-implement. Hindi yung biglaan na lang. At times nga, ang nangyayari, umpisa lang. Walang nakikitang natatapos pa. Kasi sabay-sabay inuumpisahan. At that time, malapit ang election. Right? So, it is counterproductive. Hindi nagiging more effective ang ating procurement undertaking in that case. Okay? So lahat ng competitive bidding at including yung mga alternative methods of procurement, tingnan ninyo, ano lang yung exception dito? Ano yung hindi pwede ma-EPA? Tingnan natin ang nakalista. Of course, yung subject to repeat order, kasi saka mo naman yan malalaman if pwede tayo mag-repeat order by the time dumating na yung implementation phase at kinulang tayo. So walang EPA dyan. Shopping, wala yan. Kasi di ba yung shopping natin, A, emergency. Di mo naman ini-imagine ang emergency. Shopping B, pag wala din sa PS. So ini-expect naman natin, PS will level up at magkakaroon sila ng stocks as you go to PS. Nego procurement sa 3 instances. Hindi ka naman nag-i-imagine na magkakaroon ng emergency. So hindi ka mag-e-EPA for emergency. Knock on wood, wait tayo. Kung dumating yan. Takeover of contracts. Hindi ka rin mag-i-expect na iiwanan ng contractor yung mga projects na i-award nyo sa kanila. So in the event lang ito mangyari, saka tayo nagre-resort to these modalities. and including the nego procurement SVP. Ito yung mga pangangailangan ng LGU in small amounts, which may be triggered by actual occurrence also of the need to procure. So, hindi mo ito kailangan i-subject to EPA. Copy? So, therefore, all other modalities, competitive bidding, yung direct bidding, direct procurement could already also be subject to EPA. Okay? Sige. So, let's move on. What are the preparatory activities that you should do first before conducting EPA? Go back sa quadrant 1. This is the same preparation that we will do. Go back to quadrant 1, do a market study, do pre-canvas. If there's a need for cost-benefit analysis, a more strategic way to prepare, if there's a need to conduct FS, by all means, we will do that first as a requirement. Okay? Especially for mga high-impact projects na magko-construct tayo ng bridge over a long span of water to connect edge of an island to another edge of another island. So it may require an FS. How feasible is that? So yan. Pag mga ordinary naman na mga procurement needs, market study may be enough for us to prepare for civil works. To prepare for the detailed engineering design and estimate, the scope of work, the program of work, including yung mga regulatory clearances. Ano ba itong mga regulatory clearances that we are referring to? Minsan we are required to resecure from the DENR, right? Environmental clearances. From the DPWH for the, anong tawag nito? Yung disaster resiliency of our buildings. From the Bureau of Mines and Geosciences, na hindi siya, yung location natin for our high-rise building is not in the, anong tawag natin yan? Earthquake fault. There's another term for that. No? So meaning safe siya kasi hindi siya dadaanan, hindi siya matatamaan, knock on wood. And the more common na nakaka-delay itong mga right-of-way acquisitions. Marami sa ating mga projects in government, mayroon ng pondo for the building. Pero yung location pala, yung lote, hindi pa pala pag-aari ng government. Ano pa lang, mayroon pang proseso. And this process takes time. Especially if the owners of these private properties will not cooperate. In other words, they will not allow. So, nagkakaso pa yan. Lalo na pag hindi clear, sino ba talaga yung mga owners nito? Yung heirs ng mga owners nito. So, may mga kino-contest. So, may mga legal repercussions dito. So, in which case, huwag muna kayo huwag muna kayo mag-appropriate for the budget of the building kung hindi pa clear ang right-of-way acquisitions. Okay? So ito yung mga preparatory natin for the EPA. The same apply sa regular procurement activity. Okay, so since LGUs tayo, kanino isa-submit yung ating indicative APP based on the LEP? Ano yung reference document ni BAC Secretariat to prepare the indicative APP? It is the LEP, the Local Expenditure Program, as submitted to the Sanggunian. So, kanino naman isa-submit yung indicative APP based on the LEP? Again, to the Sanggunian. Okay? Kung NGA, GOCC sa aming office, DBM, pag sa GOCCs sa GCG, the Government, Commission for GOCCs. Okay? So now, another requirement under DBM Circular Letter 2018-8 and GPPB Circular 5-2018, may mga guides tayo, may mga references tayo for us to be properly guided as we conduct EPA. Some people in the back has reservations. Kaya sinasabi ko sa inyo ngayon, may legal basis tayo to proceed with the EPA. So dapat kayo mismo na back, kung back member kayo, or ikaw na hope, or ikaw na backsec, or ikaw na end user unit. So everybody has to know the same knowledge as should be known by the back. Also by the accountant. Na hindi kailangan ang CAF, ito yung sinabi ko kanina, hindi natin kailangan ang CAF or Certificate of Availability of Funds for the LGU to proceed to conduct the early procurement activity. Time and again, sinasabi natin yan. Again, written in the GPPB circulars yan. Pero mayroon at mayroon mga agencies that cannot proceed for fear na baka makuha sila. Hindi nga, kasi matakot lang tayo kung hindi mo alam. Kaya nga siguro takot sila kasi hindi nila alam. Kaya nga na may training tayong ganito, no? At please help us pass the word or share what you will learn from here by hindi naman sasabihin natin na pwede na yan, sinabi kasi doon sa training, pwede na yung EPA. Be able to cite the reference document. Pag sinabi natin pwede, ano yung reference? So that yung mga colleague natin in the agency that has reservations can check, can refer, provide, you can even provide them a copy, right? You can even provide them the copy itself. Okay, so here, very clear. And the bid docs that you will be posting and in your PhilJeps posting, expressly indicate natin na EPA siya. So that the bidders, again, walang false expectation. And you can even call for an orientation sa mga possible service providers ninyo. You meet them, give them an orientation about EPA. At ano yung, para ma-address din yung kanilang mga agam-agam, yung kanilang mga apprehensions. Paano kung hindi ma-approve yung ordinance? Anong mangyari sa binayad namin sa bid docs? Lugi na kami kasi nagastuhan na kami tapos walang award pala. Yung mga things like that, no? That can be addressed during a separate activity even before you start your EPA. Mas maganda yun. Hindi pa kayo nag-umpisa, draw a list na of possible service providers, yung mga dati nyo ng service providers, and then orient them about the EPA. If this is something new that you will start to do, including your key people in the LGU, para everybody knows everything that are crucial to a successful conduct of the EPA. Ito yung sinasabi ko. Importante, they should know, prospective bidders shall be informed. And who shall do this? Tayo as the procuring entity. Okay? Dapat tayo nito. Can the LCE delegate that to the back? Yes, why not? To the procuring unit? Yes, why not? Kasi this is still outside, meaning prior to your conduct of the procurement activity itself. So walang masasabi na bakit sila lang yung pina-attend doon sa orientation? Bakit hindi kami kasali? Baka sila lang yung preferred. Walang ganon na pag-uusapan kasi nga hindi pa naman kayo nag-umpisa. You are just sharing very important information for them to decide whether to join or not. And if they decide to join, correct din ang kanilang mga documents na isa-submit. Okay? Rules and procedures, the fixed price rule, the extension of the bid validity, kasi kung hindi ma-approve agad yung budget, yung appro ordinance at ma-delay, mayroon din yan extension of the bid validity and security validity, okay? Including the eligibility requirements prior to the award, conditions of the award, and the date of earliest delivery. So all of this has to be made clear to them. So ito yung example na kakailanganin ng extension of the 120 bid validity period. So who will initiate the request for extension? It will be the procuring entity. Assuming dumating na yung January, wala pang appro ordinance. Nako, nandoon pa sa sanggunian, nagti-take time. So yon. So pag may naman, if the bidder will refuse to extend, the procuring entity is guided to reject the bid submitted by the said bidder. So pag dumating ang panahon na hindi siya willing to extend the validity kasi nga nadidelay doon sa sanggunian, beyond control ng governor and mayor, kaya nga hindi nga siya maka-award dahil wala pang appro ordinance. So even though siya na yung lowest calculated and responsive bidder, pwede na siya i-reject outright ng local chief executive. And the BAC may proceed to do the post-qualification to the next lowest bidder. Okay? And is it allowed na pwede ma-change yung form ng bid, anong tawag nito? Security? Anong guidance sa atin? It is allowed if this is made prior to the expiration. So kung hindi pa naman nag-i-expire yung bid security, pwede siya ma-change yung, kasi di ba pwede in different forms ang ating bid security, as will be discussed to you by another speaker. Okay, so break tayo for another knowledge check.
All right, so now we're down to our third knowledge check. But first, may I ask our Zoom participants to give me a quick heart reacts. Check ko lang po kung buhay pa tayo, ma'am. Medyo, na po kasi, jump pack yung ating discussion. Pero, busog na busog tayo, hindi man in our physical food, pero yung learnings po natin. Okay? So, may we ask our technical team to flash the question po. And our question is, technical specifications must be prepared after posting or advertisement. If specifications are not properly prepared, it will be almost impossible to complete the bidding process and award the contract. Is it A, true, or B, false? May we ask our Zoom participant to select their answer via Zoom calling feature po. Okay, so we have 30% participated. Medyo mabilis na po yung movement. 51%. Okay. So I think all feature na po in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Ayan. Allow me to share the result. Okay. So, most of the participants with 69%, ma'am, answered letter B, false. Is this the correct answer po?
Okay, so siguro nga the reason why medyo marami yung sumagot ng true, no? 31%, medyo malaki yan. The correct answer kasi is false. So bakit kaya maraming sumagot ng mali? Medyo na-confuse siguro sila sa the way the question was framed. But focus tayo sa first question. Can you flash it again, please? Yung the first question there, the first statement sa question, ang paggawa ng text specs is done after the posting. Mali po yan. Yan. Text specs must be prepared after posting or advert. Mali po yan. So diyan ang first, the basic question that needs to be answered. Correct? So itong second statement kasi parang explaining that if specifications are not properly prepared, it will be almost impossible to complete the bidding process and award the contract. That statement is true. Okay, that statement is true. But the question is the first statement. So dapat ang text specs is done before the posting. In fact, before pa tayo nagpi-pre-proc, dapat mayroon na tayong clear specs. At kaya nga again, nire-require ang pre-proc, pwede pa natin i-review yan. Kasi baka may mga nakaligtaan, may mga important aspects na hindi natin na-factor in when we were doing the procurement planning. So, pwede pa siyang ma-refine in the pre-proc before tayo mag-post. Kasi we cannot anymore alter unless mag-allow tayo ng modifications, di ba? Which is also another, makakadelay na naman ng ating procurement timeline. Okay, so is that clear?
All right, I think clear na po, ma'am. Congratulations po for those who got the answer correct. Thank you, Director Laceras, for the clarifications. Let's proceed na po with our session.
Okay, so we're down to the next few slides na. Let's move on to the procurement timeline. So another worry ng ating mga BAC is paano yun sa EPA? Baka maglalampas tayo sa ating mga maximum number of days to conduct our procurement activities kasi may procurement timelines tayong sinusunod. That is a valid concern ng ating mga members of the BAC. Okay, but be aware also that there is also a policy allowing for the tolling of the periods. Meaning, by the time matapos yung recommendation of the award, ito muna dito muna tayo tutok. Dali, asan na nga ba yun? Okay. Ayan, tolling of periods muna tayo ha. Babalikan natin yun kanina, yung award yun. So, pending approval, ito yung sinasabi natin. Pending approval and effectivity of the GAA sa national, APRO ordinance in the case of the local, LGU, the following period shall be suspended or tolled. So mag-i-stop tayo sa counting, ang ibig sabihin dito. So hindi kayo dapat matakot ang BAC na maglalampas tayo sa maximum kasi we will be allowed to stop or pause. Ano dito is magpo-pause tayo, big comma, sa counting. Number one, ano dito is at the BAC level, the 3-month period within which to complete the procurement process from the opening of bids up to the award of contract. So this can also be, hindi tayo lalampas dito sa maximum na yan kasi nga allowed tayo mag-post within the 3-month period na yan, including the 15-day period for the HOPE to approve the reso of the BAC and to issue the NOA. Provided also under, ito yung mga section na possible na magiging concern ng ating mga BAC na baka ma-violate natin. Hindi po, kasi nga allowed tayo mag-suspend ng counting. Okay? So, further, it says here, the period of time for the award of the contract and the termination of the procurement process, as the case may be, shall begin to run again upon effectivity of the APRO ordinance, as the case may be. Therefore, it shall not commence anew, meaning we will not start from another timeline counting, but rather the HOPE, the head of the procuring entity, is granted the remaining balance of the remaining period to award the contract or terminate the procurement process. So, para medyo mas klaro, mayroon tayong example dito para nasusundan ng lahat. Okay, let's take a look at this. So, example, nakapag-conduct ito ng EPA, itong agency na to, at yung bid opening nila is say July 30 nangyari. Then, baka kailangan natin ito i-adjust kasi this is an example for an NGA. Assuming nakasubmit immediately si Presidente July 25 ng NEP to Congress. So kung LGU tayo, ang ating earliest dito sa EPA would be after October 16 kasi October 16 ang deadline ng LCE to submit the LEP to their respective sanggunian. So if that is the case, just for discussion purposes, let's use this. So kung July 30, nag-umpisa yung bid opening, tumakbo na ng 73 days. 73 days ang lumipas and the BAC was able to submit a resolution recommending award, or exactly October 11. So, after the submission on October 11 ng BACRECOM, we are all aware that si Hope cannot award yet. Kasi nga hihintayin pa yung approval ni Sanggunian ng APRO ordinance and the effectivity of the APRO ordinance. Copy? So in which case, the day after, which is October 12, start na tayo mag-toll ng period. We stop counting from October 12 until kailan na-approve yung APRO ordinance. So assuming in this example, January 1, mayroon ng effective na APRO ordinance. So from October 12 to January 1, yun ang ating October 12 to December 31, that is the exact number of days na nag-stop counting ang ating LGU. Okay? So, how many days therefore is the remaining for the Hope to do the awarding? Kasi sinasabi natin, the Hope is given 15 days to award. Maximum yan, 15 days to award. Okay. So, in this case, 73 days pa lang ang na-consume ng ating BAC. So, if we reckon with the maximum 3-month period, mag-i-end yung 3 months na yan when? Kailan mag-i-end? January 18. Okay? Because by then, magdadagdag na lang tayo, mag-i-start tayo ng remaining, to count remaining 17 days. So 90 minus 73 will give us a remaining 17 days. And within that 17 days period, the Hope can already do the awarding. Okay? So between January 1 until January 16, the Hope can issue the NOAA to the LCRB. Okay? So in that case, ito yung explanation there. The Hope has 17 days to complete the procurement process from the approval and effectivity of the APRO ordinance. So this is the period remaining from the 3 months to complete the procurement process. Ayan, I narrated this earlier. From July 30 to October 11, so 90 days less 23 days, or the period covering July, not 23, 73 days, di ba? 73 days yung tumakbo. Ayan, medyo may mali doon sa pag-copy. So 73 days kasi ang tumakbo from July 30 to October 11. So this is 73 days here, not 23 days. Okay? So here, if the approval and effectivity of the GAA is January 1, the 3-month period to complete the procurement process and the 15-day period for the Hope to approve the contract shall run again. And the Hope to award, yan, from January 1 to complete the process, it will be January 18, yung maximum. So hindi tayo lumampas, in other words, ng maximum period of 3 months. Okay? So let me go back kanina sa where we left. Ito. We mentioned this kanina, revision of the indicative APP before award of contract. Kaya nga may 15 days. Si Hope, kasi nga babaguhin pa yung indicative annual procurement plan to become final. Final APP based on the APRO ordinance. So here, it is clearly elaborated here. As soon as the funding source for the procurement project has been approved, regardless of the stage, and upon approval of the APP and the commencement of the running of the period, the Hope may approve or disapprove the recom of the BAC. So when will the Hope approve? So, I mean, if it is approved, the Hope shall issue the NOAA to the LCRB and thereafter sign the contract. What about if the Hope will disapprove? Ano yung magiging basis? Ano yung magiging action? The Hope shall notify the BOC and the bidder in writing of the decision and the grounds for disapproval. Now, I will raise a question here. Is it a possible reason na, is it possible na even though kasi nag-EPA and then the project is still in the APRO ordinance, nandoon pa rin yung budget, hindi siya nawala. Possible pa rin ba na hindi i-award ni Hope yung contract? Possible pa rin ba na i-disapprove niya ito? Kasi I'm ano lang dito sa possibility scenario na dinis-approve pa rin ng Hope even though nasa APRO ordinance siya. Kasi another reason why i-disapprove is kung wala talaga siya sa APRO ordinance. So wala kang budget. Diba? Wala kang ABC. So no reason to award. But is it the only instance na pwedeng i-disapprove ng Hope or possible other instance can come in? And ito yung sinasabi natin yung, can the Hope exercise the reservation clause na pwede niya i-disapprove even though may budget siya? The answer is yes. Pwede pa rin siya. Hindi naman absolute na just because nandyan naman yung budget sa APRO ordinance, bakit dinis-approve? Kasi mayroong ibang reason possible na kita ang ating Hope dito sa section 41. Ito yung sinasabi natin, the Hope has the authority pa rin to exercise the reservation clause under section 41. So pwede pa rin niya hindi i-award. Okay? Yung contract even though may budget siya in the APRO ordinance. So because another reason not to award is nawala talaga siya totally or kinulang. Ito nawala siya na zero, wala sa APRO ordinance or sa GAA or kinulang. Yung initial ABC niya is 1M, yung contract cost is LCRB is 900,000, so kulang pa rin. Hindi pwede sabihin ng governor, mayor, ako na mag-abono ng 100,000. I-award na natin. Hindi. So, no awarding. Magbabago tayo. Magre-revise. Magre-procure uli. Magre-readjust ng documents. Kasi worth 800 lang ang ating ABC. So, Rule 2, ito yung sinabi ko na. And Rule 3, ito yung kung yung GAA na, I mean yung release, halimbawa, coming from national, ay withdraw o hindi na tinuloy ni-release ng national government. So wala ring basis to award. Okay, so I think we are done. Sa monitoring side naman, ito yung reminder sa atin na awards made under EPA, kailangan natin i-report under a column separate from the regular procurement activities. So may mga reportorial requirements pa rin tayo to be complied with. And we are reminded with these reportorial requirements to the GPPB, including the deadlines. Okay? So here, may mga extended deadlines tayo where dati January 30 ang mga deadlines for the approved APP. So pag ma-delay naman yung approval ng budget, pwede rin naman ma-delay yung submission ng final APP. For the PMRs, first semester, may deadlines din tayo. That's every 14th day of the following semester. Okay? Including the APCPI. Hindi yata ito na-update kasi parang June 30 na ang mga extended deadlines natin, June 30. Ito na yung updated, correct. Ito yung original, ito yung extended deadlines. Okay? So tama. June 30 na yung ating mga deadlines for the APCPI, result submission for 2021, including our mga PMRs. Okay? Including our 2022 APP, hindi na January 31, extended siya until March 31, meaning within the first quarter na extend at least. Okay? So last last knowledge check.
All right. We're now down to the most awaited part. We will be having our last knowledge check question, or what we call the prize question. So this time, we will ask our dear participants to type in your answers to the Zoom chat box. The first one to post the correct answer with the correct name format will receive a special token from GPPBTSO. So, ready? Ayan. So may we ask our technical team to flash the question. The question is, early procurement activity is applicable for procurement projects undertaken through negotiated procurement, small value procurement. Is it A, true, or B, false? Ayan. So ngayon, malalaman na natin kung sino ba talaga yung attentive pa as of the moment, despite na medyo mahaba yung ating discussion, pero busog naman tayo sa kaalaman for this morning. Ayan. So I think may mga nakasagot na po. Ayan. So maybe also, thank you also dun sa mga sumagot po sa Zoom polling question, though our winner po will be coming from the Zoom chat box. Okay? So I'll be closing the poll questions in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So, Director, most of the participants with parang 50-50 kanina actually nakita ko nagpang-abot. Pero last minute may nag-change pa ng mind. So, most of the participants po answered with 57% letter B, false. Is this the correct answer po?
At least majority naman, natutuwa naman ako. Majority answered correctly. Pero nalulungkot ako sa 43%. Kasi talaga mention ko to siya kanina, in-emphasize ko ito kanina, no? Doon sa discussion natin sa EPA. So siguro na-miss out lang nila. Ito din yung isang downside pag virtual minsan, ano? Talagang hindi lahat, kung lalo na if you are doing multitasking, ito yung downside dito. Pag nagkataon hindi ka nakatutok sa screen, maski ko sinabi, may possibility hindi mag-register talaga. So yan. So kaya na mali, yung 43%. Yung mga SVP, hindi po siya subject sa EPA. That was the, in the list of those na exempted sa EPA, siya yung nasa last kanina sa list. Okay? But anyway, congratulations everyone for at least trying your best to answer correctly. At least for the effort. Back to you, Jo.
Thank you so much po. So, at this moment po, let me announce the winner. Our knowledge check winner for today, upon verification and validation of the technical team, we would like to congratulate po Mr. Howard Resplasios of LGU Digos, Davao del Sur for answering or for first answering the correct answer. Okay, to our winners of special tokens, aside from our KC winner, please do check your messages and our event secretariat will contact you on how you may claim your prizes. Thank you so much to our participants for actively participating po in our polling questions. So for now, if you still have questions po on the topic presented by Director Laceras, please do drop them at the Zoom chat box. And for our Facebook Live viewers, you may also participate po and send your questions through the comment section so we can also include them in the open forum. So at this moment po, thank you so much, Director Laceras, for facilitating a very informative and comprehensive discussion on procurement planning and budget linkage, including early procurement activities. So this time po, at this point, we will take a 5-minute health break. So if you want to grab some snacks or drinks or go to the comfort room, you may do so now. For the meantime, we will be playing an audiovisual presentation on how to request training on RA 9184 and its revised IRR. So with that, please watch this. All right, and that's an audiovisual presentation on how to request training here in the GBPB TSO. So at this point, we will be having the open forum. Please note that our technical team has gathered your questions in the Zoom chat box and Facebook comment section. Please be advised that all questions related to the learning session shall be accommodated by the resource speaker during the open forum. So may we invite again our resource speaker po to join us in our open forum, Director Leceras.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, ma'am. Ayan. So I think ready na rin si ma'am to answer all your queries and clarifications po. So may we ask our technical team to flash the questions? All right. The first question is, in the preparation of PPMP, wherein the end user has an appropriation of other MOOE, and siguro scenario to ma'am, no? End user is specifically stated in the PPMP, procurement of tokens, and in the purchase request, the end user requested for the procurement of tinawon rights, which was not included in the PPMP. But the end user says that that is part of the procurement of tokens. Is this a correct way of preparing the PPMP?
Okay, so this is really an actual situation, right? So when we say procurement of tokens, generic kasi siya. Hindi siya described appropriately as to what kind of token. Kasi ang dami naman pwedeng token. So imagine later on when we, 'di ba, sa quadrant 1 tayo nag-describe ng specs niya, no? Dinidescribe natin ano ba to, anong token. So how do we ensure later on if we proceed with that kind of concept na generic lang siya, as we proceed and then later on when we go to quadrant 4, 'di ba, sinasabi natin na-satisfy ba yung need to procure the tokens? Paano natin masasagot na yes or no kung hindi nga clear kung ano yung token na yon? In this case, something was lacking in the PPMP that was prepared. So, ako personally, medyo ito bigas ito, 'di ba? Tama ba? This is not an item but this is
Yes, I think ma'am, it's kind of rice po.
Oo, a kind of rice. So, this could be kasi misunderstood by several, lalo na sa ano natin, mga tumitingin after our, kasi government tayo, maraming nakamasid sa atin, we are a public, di ba, lahat naman, lalo na may mga politikong hindi ka ano ninyo sa mga LGUs natin. So, we have all the more to be very careful. Kung yun talaga ang intention is that kind of rice, it could be a special variety na ginugrow ng LGU, kung kaya yun din ang gusto nilang ibigay as a token. So let it be clear from the very beginning na yun, right? At another one, ilang, ano ba yan? Sa quantity, ilang sack or ilang ganta, kung ganta. So is that very clearly indicated also in the PPMP? Baka very generic lahat at subject to interpretation na siya differently by different people. The issue will come out really later on. Okay?
Ayan. So, thank you for a very comprehensive explanation, ma'am. Let's go to the next question. All right. So the next question is, could the bank use the indicative APP for the early procurement short of award?
Yes, ma'am. Ito yung sinasabi natin kanina na indicative APP kasi dalawang klase. Yung unang indicative APP is the supporting document to the budget. Okay? Within the local chief executive, sa executive branch ng LGU, nagkakaroon ng mga deliberations yan. So it could be yung original APP based on the proposal, nagbago din siya when the time comes na nag-submit na si Mayor, si Gov ng LEP or Local Expenditure Program. So still, kung assuming man hindi nagbago, indicative APP pa rin siya based on the LEP. So dalawang klaseng indicative APP tayo dito ha. Indicative APP based on the budget proposal as submitted as consolidated ng various PPMPs, okay? At number 2, indicative APP based on the LEP. So ang basis for the EPA, ang reference document for the EPA is the indicative annual procurement plan based on the LEP. Don't forget to emphasize that. So, kasi kung walang LEP, walang EPA. Okay? Kung walang submission si Gov, si Mayor sa sanggunian through the LEP, walang early procurement activity. Okay, so I hope that's clear.
Ayan, malinaw naman po, ma'am. So, for the next question, anong pinagkaiba ng AIP or Annual Investment Plan and APP? Pwedeng magamit yung AIP instead of APP sa procurement po?
Ay hindi, magkaiba po yan. Ang ating AIP, Annual Investment Program yan ha, hindi siya plan. Kasi pag short term, kasi annual na ito, program yan. Pag long term, it's a plan. So, the Annual Investment Program is the whole of LGU list of all your priorities. Yung lahat na pagkakagastuhan ng LGU, including personal services, MOOE, and capital outlay. So, nasa AIP yan. And that is being done, ang gumagawa ng AIP natin through the Local Development Council. Kinukonvene ni Gov, ni Mayor, ang ating Local Development Council composed of government plus non-government members, yung mga civil society organizations natin. So medyo malaking proseso ito, yung AIP, crafting ha. And ina-approve ito ng sanggunian via a resolution. Ina-approve ng local sanggunian via a resolution adopting the AIP as crafted by the Local Development Council. Whereas the APP is the smaller version, a smaller portion lang siya of the entire AIP. Kasi nga, okay, AIP, sabihin na natin 20 million. Okay, that's the total AIP. Pero, ang kaya lang i-fund ng munisipyo is say, sabihin na natin 18 million. So yun lang ang nasa executive budget or annual budget, 18 million. So mayroong 2 million sa AIP, priority siya ng LGU pero wala pang pondo. Hahanapan pa ng pondo. Okay lang yun. Kasi nga, priorities lang siya naman ang listahan. AIP is a listahan ng lahat ng priorities, whether kaya mapunduhan ngayon, through the annual budget or maghahanap pa tayo ng pera, manghihingi pa tayo. Yun. So nandoon na siya sa AIP. And once there's a budget and then once there is fund, mayroon kayong na-receive na mga hiningi ninyong assistance, supplemental budget na lang agad kayo. Kasi nasa AIP na siya. Whereas, ang APP, Annual Procurement Plan, is a document that supports your annual budget. So meaning, yung APP mo, assuming yung budget natin, di ba, magkano yung annual budgets ko sa example ko? 18 million. Baka doon sa 18 million na yan, 5 million lang yung ating APP dyan, yung total. Kasi yun lang ang kailangan bilhin ni LGU. Yung remaining 13M are, kasi 20 yung example ko, yung remaining 13M are for PS. Hindi mo na may bibilhin ang PS. Other MOO, hindi mo naman kailangan bibilhin yun. Yung mga travel, yung mga konsumo natin, utilities, training, hindi mo naman bibilhin yun. So, yung total lang ng need ni LGU that has to be procured, yun ang total ng APP natin. So, talaga totally magkaiba sila. Okay?
Alright, thank you, ma'am. I hope wala na pong malilito between AIP and APP.
Oo nga,
and
medyo
I think, ma'am, this
sounds sila familiar. Medyo
sounds like
pwede siyang ma-used interchangeably, but that's why it has to be very clear na AIP is a planning document for the whole LGU siya. Whether you will procure or not, basta kailangan ng pera, kailangan ng appropriation, dapat nasa AIP siya. Whereas ang nasa APP again, yung kailangan lang bilhin. Okay? Yung kailangan lang natin i-procure. Okay, sige.
All right, ma'am. I think this is the last question on deck din, ma'am. So let's proceed to the last question. Considering that the end user is the responsible person in determining the ABC, would it mean that the end user also be liable whenever there is an overpricing of a particular procured goods?
Okay. Well, it would depend on kung yung ground ng say complaint no will focus on the overpricing. Remember, nag-propose si end user unit. Dumaan na siya sa assessment in the second quadrant. So dito sa second quadrant, kaya nga assessment ang term, another term for assessment could be review before in-approve. So in that area, pwede na rin siya makita, assuming talaga glaring yung overpricing niya. Pwede na siyang makita. Assuming hindi nakita, na-approve siya. Tapos pupunta na tayo sa quadrant 3, yung actual procurement na. So pwede pa rin siya makita dito sa quadrant 3 during the pre-proc. Kaya nga very important ang pre-proc, 'di ba? Even doon pa lang sa quadrant 1 nga sinasabi nga natin sa quadrant 1 nagkakandak na tayo ng market study to determine ano ba yung current pricing niya. Pero by the time nga na dumating sa quadrant 3, mayroong lapse of time. So, it could be, there could still be a possibility na masama pa rin siya kung talaga yung glaring na overpricing niya can still be attributed even after a lapse of say how many months ago. At that time, overpriced na siya. Or ngayon lang siya na overpriced. Kasi depende kung was there a trigger point na biglang umakyat yung presyo recently lang? So which means dito na siguro sa quadrant 3 kasi may ABC na tayo, remember, 'di ba? Yung ABC natin based dito sa quadrant 1. So kung nagkaroon ng bidder na nag-join na successful yung award based naman doon sa ABC na approve in the budget, pero glaringly sinasabi na overpricing, it could still possibly implicate the end user unit. But again, there were already levels of assessment and approval after that. So depende na yan sa how the end user unit will also justify and paano din naging thorough yung ating back in the quadrant 3. Kaya hindi tayo dapat maging very complacent in saying na kasi pirmado naman na yan ni ganito, consider na natin siya as okay. There's always a value added dapat doon sa mga succeeding processes. Okay? Para to ensure na assuming man nakita na may overpricing, ibalik nyo na, ipakorrect nyo na before it's too late. Right? Before it's too late. Kasi kung lumabas na yan sa LGU, kayo na lahat yan ang mananagot niyan. Instead of curing the defect before it gets out of proportion, parang ganon before it gets to the wrong hands, sabihin na natin, nakukorek na siya. Kaya nga, importante dito yung team approach talaga sa LGU, in any agency for that matter. Tulungan tayo to ensure na no one will suffer the unwanted consequence just because we wanted to push for a particular undertaking. Hindi naman natin sabihin na responsibility naman ni end user unit yan. So kung ano yung nilagay ni end user unit yan, siya na yan, bahala sumagot dyan. Tayo naman, procurement arm. Hindi pwedeng ganon. Kasi may exercise of discretion tayo na somehow nandyan sa level natin as a collegial body, and I'm referring to the BAC. Malaki ang role ng BAC din natin dito. Okay? So again, boils down to parang magkakaroon dapat, sana mayroong mga sintatawag natin na mga spot checking or yung red flags, yung red flags na anytime during that 4 quadrant, even before ending sa 3rd quadrant, mayroon na tayong nakaka-spot check na tayo ng mga red flags and immediately nako-correct. And usually, this happens pag somebody or a group of few people composes what we call the procurement, do what we call procurement management. Sila yung nakakaintindi sa buong proseso. Kasi baka si end user unit, concern lang niya sa kanya lang. Si BAC naman sa kanya lang role din niya as a BAC, as the procurement arm. Other people may just have that kind of limited understanding sa kanilang role. Pero somebody has to have a higher, has to be on a higher ground. Ito yung sinasabi natin na procurement management is now we now need to shift to procurement management so that nakikita immediately or na-unclog kung saan yung mga clog, saan yung mga problematic areas, nasusolve siya agad, nabibigyan agad siya ng needed intervention before it becomes too late. Kumbaga sa sakit pa, before it gets critical, nabibigyan ng ng maagang diagnostic study na gagamot while pwede pang magamot. Okay? Kung hindi na siya kaya magamot, ito na, kaso na, mahirap na, di ba? Mahirap na. So, team approach pa rin ang importanteng guidance natin at tulungan, walang laglagan. Lalo na LGU, ang dami dyan, sad to say, sad to note. I have friends, budget officers na mga naging casualties. Kasi nga, apparently, parang nagiging nagtuturuan na. No? Instead of helping each other, parang nagtuturuan na sila. Maybe again brought about by the undercurrent sa political dynamics in the LGU. Okay? So I hope that I made that sharing more enlightening to all of you.
Ayan. Thank you po. And with that concludes the open forum. If you have more questions po, you may still ask our resource speaker even after this webinar by visiting slido.com. All you have to do is to just type in the event code #governmentprocurementph, to which the GBBBTSO will answer through an issuance or through FAQs. With that, we would like to thank our resource speaker for today, Director Imelda R. Cabalona Laceras, for graciously accepting our invitation to be part of this online training. Thank you, ma'am. Ayan. So before we end our program, allow me to give a quick recap of our today's session. We have a comprehensive learning discussion about the Philippine procurement paradigm, covering the preparation of our PPMPs and APP, and the tools in project costing in the determination of ABC, as well as the elements of life cycle costing, and the scope and application of early procurement activities. And importantly, we also highlighted the importance of having efficient planning and budgeting to improve the effectiveness of the procurement process in the government. Again, today's session is led by Director Laceras. Thank you so much, ma'am, for accommodating po. At this point, allow me to make a few final reminders. For participants' evaluation, after the end of the program, participants are likewise reminded to evaluate the training activity and resource speakers through the Google form, and the link will be shared to you by our event secretariat. Rest assured that all the information gathered for this online training shall be treated with confidentiality consistent with the provision of the Data Privacy Act. And again, as important reminders for the issuance of your certificates, the certificate of attendance shall only be issued to confirm participants who are present all throughout this 5-day activity. And for the certificate of completion, it shall be only awarded to confirm participants who successfully completed the online training, participated in the knowledge check, and complied with all the requirements. Otherwise, certificate of participation shall be furnished. And for questions and other concerns, please contact us through the email flashed to your screen. We would like also to thank all LGUs for attending and participating in our first day of the 5th batch of MLGU online training on RA 9184. I know that you will have a great learning experience in the next few days session in the procurement laws, rules, and regulations. Before saying our goodbyes, may I request everyone po to please open again their cameras for a group photo opportunity. May we ask our research speaker to join us po for this group opportunity. Ayan. So, I hope itong mga mukhang to is nandito pa up to the end of our 5-day activity. So, I think we will be having 2 frames for this group photo. So, at a count of 3, please show us your best smile. Okay? So, 1, 2, 3. For the second shot, 1, 2, and 3. All right. So that concludes our second day of the online training for the municipal local government units on Republic Act number 9184 and its 2016 revised implementing rules and regulations for batch 5. Again, in behalf of the Capacity Development Division and GPPBTSO, thank you for actively participating in our day 2 of MLGU online training. This has been your facilitator, Maluka Agbay. See you tomorrow at 8 a.m. Mabuhay po and stay safe.